Some may find the following disturbing. Discretion is advised.
David Montgomery moved up 14 spots. A future 4, we flipped to 5 and a 6. The running back, outstanding production, vision, instincts, contact balance. He's elusive in the hole. And on top of that, he has unbelievable makeup and character. Riley Ridley, it's a great example of us taking the best player on our board. So there's a lot of traits we like about this player. Obviously, his size, his hands, his catching radius, his ability to win contested battles, his route running, and just increasing competition at the position. But truly, by far the best player on our board, and very excited to select him. Duke Shelley in the 6th round, a guy I feel like we've been talking about internally for a long time. So a little bit undersized, but extremely athletic, really twitchy, good ball skills, 4-year starter at K-State. His competitiveness just jumps off the tape when you're watching Duke Shelley. Creeth White from Florida Atlantic, 7th round. The first trait you're talking about this player is speed. Standout speed for this guy. Runs a 4.38. Also brings a lot of value to special teams. Stephen Denmark from Valdosta State with our final 7th round pick has ridiculous measurables. A guy that we went down there and worked out privately. Relatively new to the position, only 1 year at corner after switching from receiver. So a guy we feel has tremendous upside ahead of him. And a guy that both our defensive coaches, our special teams coaches, and our scouts were equally excited about, just working with that upside and the talent that he has.
Drink up, everybody, and welcome to the Barroom, our next to last Draft on Tap episode. Yes, it's coming to a close, but we've got a big extravaganza for you, what will surely be minimum 2 hours, probably closer to 3 hours, where we're going to talk about all the players selected in the draft and the multiple undrafted free agent signings the Bears made yesterday. Some really intriguing names to talk about. We are going to have with us Danny Shimon, our draft savant, and Matt Carstensen, the host of Cars Keys. The three of us will talk for the next several minutes. Shayne Marsall will join us a little later. He is on the road. He's going to pull over and share some thoughts with us and then get back on the road with his family. And then later, we're going to have a cavalcade of people coming through and sharing their thoughts, including Lorin Cox of Locked On Bears and scheduled to appear Adam Rank of the NFL Network and longtime friend of the Barroom. And we might have some other surprises for you as well. Guys, I want to begin by getting your thoughts overall on the draft. Not specifically going into detail on the players, because we're going to do that later, but just overall, what are your thoughts about Ryan Pace's, what is it now, 5th draft with the Chicago Bears? And tell me whether you're pleased, not pleased, and why. Danny, we'll start with you.
Hey, good morning, Aldo. Just covering the draft in a whole here, I think they did a very good job in terms of from only having 5 picks and being able to move up and fulfilling one of their primary needs, trading up and getting the running back Montgomery out of Iowa State. I think that was huge. And then coming back and on day 3 yesterday and getting a kid like Ridley, Riley Ridley was also a great move as well. But with the 5 picks, you kind of want to try and make it's going to be hard to fulfill all your needs. But I think what they did was they came out with some intriguing prospects later in day 3, and I think they got 2 future starters for sure with Montgomery and Riley Ridley.
Yeah, if you listen to Ryan Pace's press conference after they drafted David Montgomery, he did express some frustration that they had to wait so long. And you can tell, just like you, Danny, he's a scout and he wants as many picks as possible. And to have to wait that long to get the first player drafted in 2019 was frustrating for him. Cars,
It was a very solid draft. It's hard to get super excited about, kind of some of the picks just because wide receiver is a position of strength for us. While I really like the pick, it certainly was a best player available, but it's harder to get a little excited about that. It was, to me, a very solid draft overall. I give it to me like about a B, just for where they were and who they picked up. They've done, in my opinion, a much better job on the undrafted free agent side, though, than they did in the draft, and they did very well in the draft.
Now, when you include Khalil Mack as the first rounder and Anthony Miller as the second rounder, what's the grade there, Cars?
Well, I mean, anytime you add Khalil Mack, that's an A. It's kind of, I don't care. You can have Khalil Mack and then don't pick again for the rest of the draft, and that's just a win. But it's very interesting. I found the Ridley pick just to be the most fascinating one for me, just because of how deep they are. They've already had some signings there. When you add in Anthony Miller into that grade, we're young and we've got a lot of skill at that position. So it's definitely not your father's Bear team anymore.
It really is a testament to how Ryan Pace values the board. He doesn't care if there's an opening, at a certain position, there's a need at a certain position. If on his board he's got a particular player that he's listed as far and away the BPA, he's going to stick with it. And he has talked about that, about when he was at New Orleans, how he learned from mistakes made by the Saints organization that they drafted out of need as opposed to BPA, and they paid the price for it. Danny, you're a guy who sort of adheres to that philosophy, but how disappointed were you when you saw the Bears get Riley, another receiver, to add to the depth chart?
I do follow that philosophy, and you have to go BPA, because if you don't, if you reach for need, that's where you have those misses. That's where you see, players being elevated to draft position where they're really not, they're not going to succeed. And that's where you get all these misses. So yes, BPA is the way to go, in my opinion, especially if you're a team like the Bears, who really, you came in with a limited amount of needs. Now I know edge is probably one of the big needs that they didn't really, fulfill here to my liking. But, with a kid like Riley, it's like he's a second round grade, and he got him in the fourth round. That is tremendous value. And I understand that the fact that the receiver is not a need for the Bears currently, but if you see a player with that kind of caliber of sitting there, like Rick Pace said, just kind of sticking out on your board, you got to take him. We talked about, Aldo, you and I talked about Adam John's piece in terms of drafting for future and contracts and stuff like that. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't receiver one of the positions where John's pointing out in his article that this is where the Bears might need to target to get some depth there to kind of offset some of the future free agent contracts that are upcoming?
Yes, again, kudos to Adam Johns. I think, of all the articles, and I've read a lot of them prior to the draft, that to me was one of the more incisive ones in terms of where the Bears might draft. Because while, I still believe that Pace has the BPA mentality, you got to know that he also is considering what's going to be the future in 2020 with contracts, and the fact that he needs to sign big name players like Eddie Jackson and extend contracts to other players. It's going to cost money. So there is the possibility that in 2020 we could see a starting wide receiver crew of Anthony Miller, Riley Ridley, and Javon Wims. And that's because of the money situation. And, Cars, if those are the three starters in 2020 or 2021, what's your level of confidence with this wide receiver core?
I think that's exactly why you do it, right? If you look at after this season, you can free up about $17.5 million through releasing Allen Robinson and Taylor Gabriel, right? So that's where you're going to get some of those funds. The key to this will always be Anthony Miller. That was a guy that when they picked in the second round, they looked at him as being a true number one. So as much as I like Gabriel and Wims, they're very good, Ridley and Wims, Those are guys that are really good route runners. The playmaker that you're really counting on all this coming together is going to be on Anthony Miller. And so I have a lot of confidence in him being the guy to take that next step with a healthy shoulder this year. And if he starts to supplant Allen Robinson like he can, then that makes that whole scenario a lot more appetizing. Yeah,
it really is important to note that this team has always said they want to primarily build through the draft, and the signing of free agents is to fill in gaps. And as much as we love Allen Robinson and the fact that he is so young, you'd like to see him play the next 6, 7, 8 years with the Chicago Bears. But nonetheless, you've got to play that salary cap game. And so how do you play that salary cap game? You've got to bring in great talent through the draft. You've got to find winners in rounds 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and you've got to hit on some undrafted free agents. And speaking of undrafted free agents, I want to tell you that we're going to go in depth on UDFAs. And before Cars leaves us, he's got about 20 more minutes with us. He's going to give us his opinion on Emmanuel Hall, a key undrafted free agent signing. But I want to get back to Riley Ridley. This is what the team brass said about Ridley's strengths in yesterday's press conference after day 3 was done.
Route running, hands, catching radius, ability to win 50-50 situations. When he was in here, one of his quotes was, I'm not a 50-50 guy. I win all of them. So that's kind of his mindset. When the ball's in the air, he's going to win it.
What is it in his route running ability that allows him to create the separation?
I think there's certain route runners that just know how to set guys up, so he has a savviness to him to know how to set guys up. For as big as he is, he knows how to drop his weight and quickly get out of break points. So when you're watching him, you consistently see him separating from man coverage. And I think it's because of his physical skill set, but also he's just a very good route runner. So that's one of the first things that jumps out is just how defined his routes are, how crisp his routes are, and how he knows how to set guys up.
I want you two guys to talk about how vital it is to have wide receivers in this Matt Nagy offense that run routes with ultra precision, that are guys that Trubisky can count on to be at the certain spot, not only if they're the number 1 target on this offense, but if they're the number 2 or 3 or beyond. Cars, let me start with you on that.
It's extremely important. If you guys remember, I think it was Hogan Johns on their pod they had after the Giants game, Coach Mike Furry talking about how it looked that Chase Daniels had taken a step back. And he very pointedly had called out Taylor Gabriel for not running routes the correct depth. He called out Anthony Miller, right, supposed to be a guy that's going to run a route to get someone else open, and he was more focused on himself. That throws your timing off. This is a timing-based offense. It's a scheme-based offense where, yes, there are definitely going to be plays where they're going to just be one-on-one, but they're running route combinations to get looks, either something over the top or in the middle of the field. And so you need guys that you can trust to be there, and that was definitely something that was a struggle early on. We saw it kind of continue on throughout the season with certain receivers. And so, I keep mentioning Gabriel. I think he's the guy that's the most in trouble through all of this. He definitely outperformed what I thought he was, but he was a guy that they just couldn't count to be where he needed to be on anything really other than a go route. And so that definitely will weigh heavily on everything that they're doing. And you look at a Wims and a Ridley, these are the guys that they know. If it's got to be a 12-step out or a 12-yard out, they're going to be running 12 yards and then going out. They're not going to cut it short at 9 or 7. They're going to run the full thing. And that's really what it's going to take for this offense to take the next step this year.
Danny, your thoughts on route running, and I know you've looked at tape of Ridley, and share with us what you've seen in terms of his route running.
Yeah, in terms of what Carr just said, I agree 100%. This is a timing and rhythm-based system. If Trubisky's going to release the ball, he's not going to wait till Ridley gets out of his break and is wide open before he throws the ball. He's got to throw it to a spot, and he's got to trust his receiver to be there. He's got to be there on the spot. So it's timing and rhythm and all that stuff. So a lot of times, like in case in point with the Giants game, where there's some bad throws, and we kind of look at the quarterback like, what were you thinking? But actually, it was on the receiver. He was not at his spot, or he didn't separate or disengage from the defensive back in time to get that to haul in that reception. So Riley Ridley, just going back over Pace's scouting reports, I mean, true, and true. I mean, you look at his tape, this kid, he's got the size, the long arms, and the big, strong hands. The one thing about, running precise routes, if you're going to be pressed or jammed at the line of scrimmage, you're going to have to be able to fight those jams and be able to get off the line of scrimmage. And what he does is when he's pressed, he does a nice job of swiping through the defender's arms, and he's able to use his size to be able to sink his hips, not only that, sink his hips and separate at the top of his route. So those precise routes that we're talking about, this guy is able to get there with quiet feet at the top of his route and also be able to create that separation by sinking those hips, like I said, and then using his length to also be able to kind of push off in a way where he doesn't get called for pass interference. And that's where he's there on time. And another key thing with this kid is he played in a pro-style system at Georgia. So, he's run a full route tree. He's lined up at the X, the Y, and the Z. So another kid that comes in here pro-ready. He's run the route concepts that the Matt Nagy and the coaching staff is going to present to him. So this is not going to be new terminology. This is not going to be new concepts. He's going to be able to do slight adjustments on his routes, meaning that he's going to be able to read coverages and see where the openings in the zones are and be able to sit there. And that's where him and Trubisky got to get on the same page. So a really polished receiver in terms of route running, creating separation. And we already talked about his size, his length. He presents a big catch radius. He's able to extend away from his body and has those strong hands where he can just pluck the ball out of the air. And also can contour his body and adjust to the poorly thrown ball. So really a nice polished receiver here. Like I said, a guy that I think wasn't utilized enough at Georgia. His stats are probably one of the reasons why we saw him available in the fourth round. He never really had that big year. But he's a guy that produced with 9 touchdowns. So I definitely think this is a coup here for Ryan Pace.
Here is what Matt Nagy said when asked if Ridley can play the slot.
It depends. Once he gets in here and we see, we'll get a good feel with this new group that we have going on. But you don't want to overload these guys too early with positions. When you start getting into that zebra position for us, which is the third wide receiver position, that's where you start moving guys. That position moves around quite a bit. So sometimes it's not necessarily fair to put a rookie into that position because there is so much movement. So probably start him on the outside. And then as we go and we see what he does well, if we need to put him in the slot, we can do that.
Cars, who's going to play the slot wide receiver role the most on this Chicago Bears team? I know there's going to be multiple players playing that position, but what are you expecting out of that slot position in 2019 for the Bears?
So I think that's going to be Anthony Miller for the most part, right? I think they've really limited Gabriel to being an outside. Again, that's his limitations on some of the route running. But I also think if you look at it, Marvin Hall, who they signed this offseason, another speedster, I think they've got some looks at him as another guy that they can put into the slots for some additional concepts. Other than that, you'll probably see Trey Burton and Adam Shaheen out there a lot more frequently as well, depending on the running back packages. But I really expect this to be Anthony Miller's season there.
Yeah, I think Miller will see a lot of time in the slot as well as Taylor Gabriel as well. I think he still will get some of that ability to match up, get some mismatches, hopefully gets lined up against, a linebacker or something like that where he can take advantage of his speed and his quickness. Another guy, don't forget you mentioned Trey Burton, but this kid, Dax Raymond, I think he's going to make this team. And I don't want to jump ahead here to the undrafted guys, but he's a guy lined up in the slot a lot. He's a move tight end, so I think I can see him playing there as well. And then they have Broniker as well that, lined up in the slot as well last year. So, they have a ton of options here to line up. And even Allen Robinson at times, last year in certain formations, he was lined up in the slot as well. So they have so many different options and weapons. Like I said, they just keep adding in more and more weapons to this offense and making it more and more dangerous.
Yeah, we're seeing more and more bigger receivers moved into the slot, which worries me a little bit with the Chicago Bears because unless they move Kyle Fuller into the slot cornerback position and the guys like, Tolliver start to prove that they can play the outside on this defense and play at an NFL level, then we might have a problem there. Now, they did tried to address the slot cornerback position with Buster Skrine, an undrafted free agent, and also with draft pick. What's his first name? I forgot his first name. Shelley's first name. Duke Shelley. So, what are your thoughts on Duke Shelley? Start with you, Cars, and have you seen some tape of him and your thoughts?
Yeah, so if you watch a lot of his tape, it looks quite a bit about what we saw from Buster Screen. He's very physical. He's extremely aggressive, right? That's definitely the Pagano style. So he's not someone that's going to be too shy about throwing his weight around. What I did see, at least for me, in a lot, especially in a lot of his highlight packages, he'd break up a pass, but he didn't get his head around. He did seem to struggle that with some of the deeper coverages where he wasn't necessarily always looking for the ball. But I think you look at some of the traits, he's quick twitch, he's definitely very physical. That's a position that's going to be extremely important. I think in some instances, Screen is going to be better suited for the outside more so than he is in the nickel, and I think they might look at some of that, at putting him outside and maybe moving someone else inside in certain looks. But we'll have to see. So, I mean, I know he had an injury last year that kind of lowered his draft rating a bit, but I think they're extremely high on him. I think normally he probably would have been about a third or fourth rounder had he stayed healthy the entire season.
This is what Ryan Pace said about his new slot corner.
He's so scrappy. Like every single, if it's completed, it's earned. So he's very sticky in coverage. He's highly, highly competitive. And then he's just very athletic. Like when you look at his PBUs and his interceptions, they're coming in very athletic manners. It's not gimmies. Everything's earned. So I would say his competitiveness and just how athletic and how sticky he is in coverage.
Slot for him, you think?
It's his ideal spot is the nickel.
Yeah, the more I watch this kid, the more I like him, to be honest with you. I mean, 5'9", 173 pounds, he is a guy that lines up perfectly for that slot position. And, like Pace said, he's quick. This guy is smooth in his back pedal. He's got those easy, oily hips. He can open and flip and start running, and staying in phase with the receiver downfield. And in terms of, being able to stay in coverage, stay within with the receiver downfield, like I said, and his coverage awareness is what I'm trying to say. His coverage awareness is what really stuck out to me, whether he's playing off man or he's playing press. His ability to keep his eyes in the backfield when he's off and to read the quarterback and where he's going with the ball. Like a lot of times, Cars, I don't know if you saw this as well, where he's in off-man coverage and he'll release his guy and he'll flow to the ball. And a couple of times he made some nice interceptions on that way. So I like seeing that. I like seeing the awareness and instincts in coverage. And like Cars said, he's in terms of run defense. He'll come down, he'll throw his 173-pound body around and doesn't really care. The one thing though, Matt, I know you said that he has some issues turning back and locating the ball. That's something that I thought he did well in, and at least in the games I saw. Now this guy does get his hands on the ball. He's got 8 career interceptions, 2 of them for a pick 6, and 31 passes broken up. So I'm just curious, like you said, downfield he gets lost, or you just think he doesn't locate quick enough?
I don't think he locates. There's a couple of pass breakups that all the highlight clips show, and he's literally just not locating the ball. He's kind of seeing the guy jump and then eventually jumping with him, and his timing ends up working out all right. But those are passes that I think could have been picked off if he actually turned and located them properly. It wasn't a consistent thing, and I noticed that it was more on some of the deep coverages. But that's definitely something that they'll be able to work with him and get going. So I'm not concerned about it long term.
But the one thing you do notice is his ability to transition quickly out of his back pedal into jump routes.
Yes,
that's something he baits these quarterbacks to thinking the receiver is open, and all of a sudden you see in a split second he just transitions from back pedal to coming downhill, and all of a sudden he's jumping routes, he's tipping balls, and he's getting his hands on potential interceptions there. I love that about him.
It tells you that he's a kid who studies a lot of film and looks at tendencies, and if he's already doing that at a college level, when he gets to the pro level, it's only going to be something that massively improves.
Exactly.
Cars, we've got you for another 5 minutes, unless you can stay a little longer. So I want to get your input here on some of the other players that you're particularly intrigued in, whether they were drafted or undrafted free agents.
Sure. So I'm going to start with Steven Denmark. We were talking a lot about him before the call. It's interesting that they call him defensive back, right? Because I think they want to try him at safety first. He's got some closing speed. He's got some definite size. I think he would probably look at somewhat of a box guy, but I think he does have some kind of deep safety, over the top kind of help possibilities as well. So I think, a lot of us are looking at safety help this year. I think that this is one of the developmental guys that they're going to look at. If he can sit for a year behind Ha and kind of watch what he does, I think that's going to be a boon to us. From the undrafted side, I love Emmanuel Hall. So I'm a Missouri grad myself. That is a place that I always hope that maybe we'll get someone in the NFL that can do something, and it's always been a hard road for us. But he's a guy that I look at that's extremely speedy. He actually runs very good routes. He gets deep. He's someone that will just play and play. Drew Lock loved that guy. I think I saw that they were 7-0 when he played, and they were 1-5 when he was either out or limited. So that even though he didn't have huge catch numbers, what he brought to that offense and what he did for Drew were really significant. So I look to him, you hear me kind of talk a lot about next year and what the cap situation is. Taylor Gabriel is a guy that's in trouble, and I think Emmanuel Hall is one of those guys that could potentially unseat him. So he's got, he's been running a lot on the outside. He's been only on the left side of the offense in Missouri, which isn't terribly unusual. They don't move guys around a lot for helping some of the quarterbacks make reads. But that's a guy that if they can kind of figure out and move around in the offseason and get trained up on a couple different roles, I think next year he's a guy that will easily make a difference on the offense.
Cars, can you stick around, or do we have to say goodbye? I know you've got family obligations. I saw you posted a picture of your princess, your 3-year-old daughter, celebrating birthday. So I imagine you probably have to get the family, but you're more than welcome to stick around.
No, I appreciate it. I do have to run. I've got to go get some princess time in a bad place for men. So I'm going to go begrudgingly get ready for tea time, and we'll see what happens.
Well, I can't express my thanks enough for your input, your dedication. Your Cars Keys podcast throughout the season was much talked about. People would say that Cars got more information in 15 minutes than Phil Latoshin would in an entire Bears Hour Live. That's not a shot at Phil. I love Phil. I miss Phil.
I'll take it, though. I'll definitely take it.
It's definitely meant as a compliment and not as a dig to my brother Phil Latoshin. All right, Cars, we'll talk to you. And with that, I am going to bring in George Bayliss from across the pond. He is known to us as Bearlissimo. If you listen to ESPN 1000, he's a frequent guest on the David Kaplan show, and he's been a member of a lot of the stuff that we're doing here at the Bears Barroom, and will continue to be, because I'm going to beg him and grab him by the collar and say, you need to help us with your evaluation and your enthusiasm about the Bears. George, I'm going to call you Bearlissimo for the rest of the show. How are you, my friend?
I'm good, Aldo. I've been trying to frequent frantically in the day, just trying to keep up with all the picks and the undrafted free agency at the end of the night for me yesterday. So it's been great fun. It's Draftmas for me, so I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and even the ribbing from Shayne and Danny.
Well, Shayne's going to be joining us.
It's all written love, man.
I know.
And Shayne will be joining us in a few minutes, so be prepared for more ribbing.
I'm ready for it.
All right, now you've been listening in to what the guys have been talking about. I want to get your opinions on the receiver we drafted first and foremost. So share with us your thoughts on the new wide receiver for the Chicago Bears.
Riley Ridley was, for me, underused at Georgia. He had a higher average catch amount than his brother at Bama. Like everyone has already said, the guy is just an absolute technician when it comes to route running. But what he also does is he diagnoses coverages he's up against very, very well for me on the tape. You can see where he's setting people up as well with his route running. So very savvy, sophisticated route runner. Absolutely dependable on the catch. He's going to, whether it's contested or not, and more often than it's not, because he gets separation, he's going to come down with the ball. He wants the ball more than the other guy. And that for me, when you put that with his body control, he's a very, very good receiver, and certainly not fourth round. He's more second round for me. He's one of the top guys in the draft for me at wide receiver. So absolutely ecstatic that we got him in the fourth, and I think he's going to be a very savvy route runner that's going to be very good for Mitch.
And your thoughts on the slot cornerback that we picked up?
Little angry man is the way I would describe him. He's although he's diminutive, he's a guy who likes to thump a little bit as well. I mean, he's certainly not shy of contact. And again, what everyone has said is the guy has got very good change of direction skills, and from the slot, the two-way go is fantastic. And like Carr said, with the deeper passes, yes, sometimes he was struggling against taller receivers to locate the ball. He was more interested in keeping his hands ready to contest the catch because he couldn't outreach them. But for me and the Bears, that's not going to be so much of a problem because there are not going to be very many teams that are going to have 4 seconds to throw the ball deep downfield. So he's going to be a guy who's going to be, sitting on top of receivers in the slot, changing direction, really sticky in the coverage, and he's going to be able to sort of keep that coverage really tight and pressed and angry and physical for those sort of 3 to 4 seconds that a QB is only going to have, because any longer than that, they're going to get smacked.
All right, I am very, very pleased to announce that Shayne Marsaw has entered the bar room, and he's walked in with the type of swag that you would expect from the smartest man in the bar room and the man that predicted the Bears were going to select this wide receiver. Shayne Marsaw, how are you, my friend?
Hello. Hey, what's up, guys?
What's up, Shayne?
Yeah. Not much. No, just a little draft hangover, heading out with the fam to spend some quality time. Daddy hasn't been ever present in their lives here lately, which is totally expected by them with the draft going on and everything like that. But no, I love it. It's really, really excited about the way that things unfolded yesterday, and even more excited about what happened after the draft. This isn't me being a homer or anything like this. The way that these UDFAs came in, I got to be quite honest. I don't think I've ever seen anything like it in my history as a Bears fan. There is so much talent on this team, even before this draft, and adding the guys we added yesterday, and then the UDFAs on top of it. There's so much upside. I'm really, really excited.
This, to me, is one of the most talented undrafted free agent class that the Bears have ever brought in. And I think Pace kind of hit on it at his press conference, saying that a lot of these guys wanted to come to the Bears. Again, we're talking about the culture that these Bears have set out there. Everyone sees the Club Dub videos. Everyone sees the Bears having fun. And I think a lot that does work. I think that does attract these not only NFL free agents, but also these college free agents as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I don't think that you can underestimate, like you said, Danny, with this team. This team is so young. These guys are all out on social media. They're all having fun. They see the Club Dub things going on. They see Matt Nagy going on, the head coach being a part of it. Most importantly, there's a young, exciting quarterback there. They see guys like Tariq, and everybody wants to be a part of it. Classic cases, look at Emmanuel Hall. This Chicago Bears roster is loaded. There's a lot of wide receivers there. And Emmanuel Hall's agent could have easily steered him in another direction, but they want to be part of this. Emmanuel Hall with that speed, he's really, and he's got more size, obviously, than Taylor Gabriel. So he's bringing an element to this team that we don't really have, with a little bit of the height and a lot of speed. I was able to listen just a little bit of what Cars was saying, and guys, I love the player. Taylor Gabriel is in a mountain of trouble in this on this roster. Financially moving forward, the Bears are covering their bases, and it's that's something we're definitely going to have to keep an eye on moving forward.
Hey, Shayne, what is it about Riley Ridley that led you to think the Bears are going to draft this guy because this is a guy that I think all of us appreciated his skills, but you in particular said, this goes beyond appreciation of his skills. This is, I think, the guy the Bears are going to draft.
Aldo, we know that this is a big poker game, and in poker you have to be able to read, your opponent, just like Ryan Pace has to read the draft board. And when it's not just about, talent, it's you can't pass up value. Just Riley Ridley's value at number 4 or in the 4th round is just ridiculous. He was a guy, even in round 3, if for whatever reason the Bears would have drafted him, I would have been happy with him just because, Danny alluded to it, and I think Daniel Jeremiah on the telecast I watched on NFL Network, he alluded to it. There's a lot of mouths to feed in Georgia. You can't make everybody happy. Elijah Holyfield's running the ball a lot, and you saw Nada, their tight end. They're feeding all of these guys, and Riley Ridley is a guy that didn't get enough love there in Georgia, and he's a classic case of a kid that's going to come to the NFL. Is he a burner? No, but he doesn't have to be. Route running is the name of the game. If you don't have to be. And you look at a guy like Anquan Bolden that didn't have all the speed in the world, but he could body guys up. He could run crisp routes and get open. He's got those long arms, and he's got decent hands that he does need to work on. But just the value in itself, Danny, you and I talked about this, the value of Riley Ridley in round 4, I'm really shocked that he was even there. And I would have sprinted to the podium just like Ryan Pace did with that card with his name on it.
Exactly. Like we said earlier, Pace mentioned in his post-draft press conference, the name just stuck out on the board at that value in the 4th round. We talked about this kid, playing in a pro-style offense, but it was a run-heavy offense as well. And I think some of that production, because, like Shane just said, there were a lot of mouths to feed on that offense, and it was a run-heavy offense. I think that's why his production is down. But earlier we touched on a question of, can this kid play the slot? I think he can. I mean, I think he's got that initial quickness off the line of scrimmage, and plus with his length and his ability to extend away from his body, he gives the receiver or the quarterback a big catch target or catch radius to throw to. And he's going to be probably covered by either a smaller slot corner if he's playing in as a slot receiver, or he's going to be covered by an outside corner who doesn't have the quickness and agility to keep up with him inside, to cover a two-way goal. So I think eventually, once he gets into the offense, and I know Nagy said he doesn't want to over burden him in terms of learning all the positions, but I think once he gets comfortable, I can't see him in the slot. It's kind of similar to a Larry Fitzgerald, how his career kind of took off, or actually extended as he moved them inside. They moved them inside to the slot. So I think a big receiver like this, with the initial quickness off the line of scrimmage, for a guy who's 6'1", almost 200 pounds, he's got that quickness there that you like to see, and I think he can play the slot eventually.
It's a great point, Danny, too. Real quick, Aldo, you look at the Philadelphia Eagles and Doug Peterson. They like to incorporate bigger wide receivers in the slot. They brought back Jordan Matthews, and he's quite a bit bigger than Riley Ridley is, and they play him in the slot, and that's only going to help out your quarterback to hey, listen, this is all about mismatches, and you look at the guys that they brought in. The speed element on this team has been upgraded significantly just with these guys. Not that Riley Ridley's a burner, but he can create a mismatch in the slot, just like Danny said. And now you have options. We saw how not having enough options really killed us in the playoff game versus Philly with Trey Burton going out, and then you had the trickle-down effect. Malcolm Jenkins talked about it. I had to concentrate on Trey Burton all week long thinking about that. Boom, he's gone. Now we focus on Cohen. Cohen's taken out of the game, and Chicago doesn't score enough points. So you're adding all of these mismatches here. Now Nagy can really start to open up his bag of tricks. And with an aggressive defense, this Chicago Bears defense is going to be a more aggressive defense under Chuck Pagano. So not saying that they're going to take a step back, but Danny, George, Aldo, you guys all know if you have a more aggressive defense, there's going to be times where you can give up bigger plays, and the offense is going to have to score to make up that part of it. And this offensive firepower that the Bears are accumulating it's going to be really, really fun to watch. You hear about people talking about the third and fourth quarters of preseason games that aren't fun to watch. I'm not one of those guys. I love it all, but it's all going to be must-see TV now at this point with how deep this roster is. It's going to be a whole bunch of fun.
Shayne, I know we've got you for limited time, so I want you to talk about some of the players that you'd like to share an opinion on. But before that, RKB in the chat room, one of the new members of the Barfly Tailgate Show, Ryan Kirkland. I'm going to get this right someday, Ryan. I'm sorry. Ryan Kirkland Billings wants you to talk about the new running back that we picked up in this, sixth round? White.
Seventh round, yes.
Seventh round, Kareth White.
Yeah, Kareth White. This is a name that I brought up to Danny. Danny can chime in here just a little bit. I don't know if it was like a week or two ago, and I had asked Danny if he had seen him, and it was one of those deals where everybody knows that I like Devin Singletary, and I'm watching Devin Singletary, and he pops out of the game, and then they bring in this White kid, and I'm like, Jesus, this guy is so explosive. And then I started looking into him a little bit more, and I'm like, this cat's going to be draft eligible. And you get down here at this point, and you're going to be drafting off traits. This is a kid that returned the first return touchdown in the history of Florida Atlantic. So he's played on special teams. He's played on the coverage units. He's got that dog mentality. If you've ever listened to an interview with him, he's just a guy. The Bears went down and worked him and Singletary out at the same time. And this is another thing here with Ryan Pace we got to look at. He's, everything in the media was Bears are big on Singletary. Bears are big on Singletary. Well, that easily could have been part of the cover-up, put the interest out there in Singletary while we're, trying to sneak this kid through. But explosive kid. It just, he could have, he tapped out early and he could have went back to Florida Atlantic and been the lead guy, but we know how that goes with running backs. You got to kind of go make your money while you can. I'm just a real big fan of this kid, and I anybody that's underselling this kid and that was upset that the Bears picked him because we already drafted another running back, absolutely not. Taquan Mizell got a carry in a playoff game. So you're telling me that this kid with his traits can't contribute? Absolutely not. So I couldn't be any more happy about adding an explosive talent like this in round 7 that gives you the, Cordero Patterson is a guy that's here that's going to be primarily returning kicks, and he's going to be a gadget guy for you on offense. But again, Carr's brought it up. We have to kind of plan ahead with this financial aspect of it. And he signed for 2 years, $10 million. Can move off of him easily after 1 year if you're needed. And Kareth White brings you that return ability. And one more thing to think about here too, and nobody's going to ever want to talk about this. Everybody talks about Eddie Jackson needing a new deal. Well, let's not forget about Tariq Cohen.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of a deal you want to give a guy like Tariq Cohen? Nobody really knows at this point, and these guys are all going to want to get paid. And Ryan Pace is going to have a limit to what he wants to pay certain positions, I think. And you see him bringing in a lot of running backs, and to me, this is a little bit of a look down the road, bringing explosive playmakers that could be there in case you can't come to terms with guys like a Cohen. I'm not saying that they're not going to have the money, but there is a financial aspect to this, as always.
Shayne did, he mentioned to me, he's like, this kid, Kareth White, check him out for Atlantic. So I put on his tape. I'm like, holy crap. At Porta, he ran a 4.36 40, 21 reps, had a 42-inch vertical. So I look into him, and you're right, Shayne. I thought immediately, I'm like, all right, so in case they lose Tariq Cohen down the line, this is a kid that can easily fill in for him. He's got that burst. He's got that speed. I think he's got a better natural feel for to being at running back as opposed to Tariq Cohen. But again, he's got that return ability. He had a 545 kickoff return, yards on 19 returns last season, right? And he led the Conference USA with an average of 28.7 yards per return. So this kid does bring that special teams value to the roster as well.
What I like about him, guys, I mean, I don't know if you agree, is that he's got the speed and the quickness of Tariq Cohen, but he has the sort of the one-cut ability to be able to read blocks and cut it up the middle. He's got no aversion to running up the middle or bouncing it outside of the tackles. So as a depth piece in the running back, in the backfield as well, I think he's great there. So it's not just special teams, but the guy can catch. He can do everything, really. Just he's a little bit light on his ability to run through contact. That's the only bit that is really lacking for me as a running back, but I think he's a great prospect.
Yeah, he's not a between tackles runner. He's a guy that's going to bounce it outside. But if you do give him a hole or a crease, in between the tackles, he's got that contact balance to be able to bounce off of contact and continue running. And once he hits that, second and third level of defense, he's got that extra gear to take it all the way.
Shayne, before I let you go, I got to ask you, your son's name is Riley, so how excited was he when the Bears drafted Riley Ridley?
He was very excited. He needed a little pick-me-up because he was like I told you guys the other night, he was a big Miles Sanders fan. So Miles Sanders, unfortunately, went to the worst possible destination for the Marsaw household, if you were a fan, because he ended up in Philly. But he did like to see that the Bears drafted a guy that Daddy was very high on with the same name as him. And he did a little bit of reading on him and found out that his first name is actually Taven and his middle name is Riley. So
That's right.
That was a little bit of a kick in the balls to him, but we'll go with it. And maybe down the line, if old Mr. Ridley is a real good player for us, maybe we'll have to add that to the jersey collection.
All right, Shayne, thank you very much for taking time away from your family. Tell them, please, on behalf of all of us at the Barroom, that we really appreciate the fact that they allow you to spend as much time here at the Barroom and sharing your football acumen with us, and that we really appreciate it, and that we hope you guys have a fun day together.
All right, guys, I love it. Thanks. I'm going to be looking forward to tuning in and listening to the pod version of this tomorrow with you guys. So you guys have a good time.
Take care.
Take care,
Shayne.
Thanks, man.
Very quickly, guys, because I got a special guest coming in about 2-3 minutes. Anything regarding what Shayne just shared with us that you'd like to comment on?
Well, the one thing I would like to comment on that I didn't get a chance when we were talking about Riley Ridley was, although he didn't have that many catches, I think it's 43, 9 touchdowns. That's a hell of a lot of production from 43 catches. And that just shows you that the thing that I saw on tape, which I really love about him, is that if he's in man, he's running as precise routes with no wasted movement whatsoever to lose people in man. When he's up against the zone, he knows exactly where to break off his routes and to run it to get open in against a zone as well. So, and I think that shows with the fact that, with all those options that Georgia had to put the ball in the end zone, 9 touchdowns from 43 catches shows that he was a guy that we're looking at in the red zone, certainly to get that scoring production.
All right, I am about to bring in a gentleman by the name of Terence Young. I've just been dialing him up now.
Good morning.
Hey, Terence, how are you? I was just telling our audience that I was just about to bring you in and saying that those of us who are just super attentive during the NFL draft may have noticed you making the selection or announcing the selection of Riley Ridley for the Chicago Bears. Congratulations on that moment. Not only did you handle it with great finesse and looked really good on camera, but also you've got the opportunity to make the announcement of a player who could have a very long and successful career with the Chicago Bears. How does that feel?
Absolutely. Well, first, thanks for having me on. And just amazing opportunity. Lifelong Bears fan since little kid. I mean, middle school age, doing the Super Bowl shuffle in school. Like, just literally, you can't get bigger than that to be asked to announced the fourth round selection by the Bears. So just a great opportunity and just really random. Everyone was asking me yesterday, well, how did it come about? And how, did you win a contest? What were the, what happened? I said, well, no. I said, really, it was just a phone call. It was simply a phone call from one of the directors of ticket sales, and they just thought I would be a perfect fit for announcing the pick, and they were giving back to the fans. As you saw, they had Another person do the 6th round pick as well. So just really cool that the Bears give back to the fans like that, and just a tremendous opportunity. So, I had to wake up this morning, I can't lie, and I had to pinch myself, and I looked at the NFL card that I read off of yesterday, and I was like, yeah, that was a thing yesterday. It actually happened.
That's pretty amazing. How nervous were you on a scale from 1 to 10, with 10 being about ready to pooping your pants?
I tell you what, everyone asked me that, and I think I was pretty calm. But I'm not going to lie. It probably was somewhere in like the 5 or 6 range. But I will tell you, as it got closer, it was more nerve-wracking. And I think it was just because I wanted to go through with it. I was more anxious and excited than nervous, which was good. I said I'm not going to sit there and, practice it and try to, make sure that everything is done just in a systematic way. I just want to have fun with it, and I wanted to just be genuine. So hopefully that's what came about, and when at the end of my draft announcement.
Greg Braggs, our intrepid reporter, was there at the scene, and he videotaped you doing the announcement, and also for about a minute before they went live to you. And I saw you kind of like, jiving a little bit, and just you look like a safety who was about ready to be announced as he was going down the tunnel at Soldier Field. You look like you were ready to get this thing done and do it without flubbing, which is something that I typically do a lot of on this show.
Right. I mean, I think you nailed it. I mean, it really was. It was all about like just taking the business at hand and just making sure that I did it with the finesse, but also with the passion that I have for the Bears. So yeah, I mean, it really felt like that. It really felt like game day, and here I am. I'm coming out of that tunnel, and it's all business. But yeah, it was. I mean, just tremendous fun that I had yesterday. I mean, just amazing.
Bearlissimo, you got a question for Terence?
Oh man, you looked absolutely pumped when you were reading out that pick, and I was watching that live in England over the internet on my phone. So I thought you did a great job as well. So, but you look like you might have played a little bit in the day. Have you ever played ball?
Oh, well, no, I appreciate that. No. I actually never played football. I grew up playing basketball and baseball, so those are my sports. I think if I played football, I would have probably been a wide receiver. But it's one of those things I'll never know how good I could have been. But no, I did not play. And wow, all the way from England, that's awesome. I appreciate that. But yeah, no, never played.
Well, Bears Barroom is worldwide, so I'm not the only one. But thank you for doing what you did.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it.
Hey, Terence, when you read the name, was this a player that you said, immediately, oh, I know this guy, he's going to be great? Or what was your reaction when you first saw the name?
So here's the crazy thing about this. So my wife and I live full-time outside of Atlanta, Georgia. We've lived in Atlanta, Georgia now for about 17 years. Or no, excuse me, it'll be 19 years. 19 years. We live part-time in Chicago, where I'm at currently, and we're here obviously for the weekend and the draft event. So I know Riley. So it was funny when I saw the card and they ran it out to me. I was like, oh my goodness. I'm like, one, I was praying that it was a name that I could pronounce, so that was apparent. I was good there. And then I said, wow, and here's a player that I know. I'm a big UGA follower for college football, so being able to watch him play there was has been tremendous. And I thought that we may go offense with that 4th round pick. I wasn't sure if we go offense or possibly a cornerback, which obviously we addressed later on in the draft. But it didn't surprise me, and he was, if I'm right, probably the best player available that was still on the board when we picked. So tremendous job by Pace and company as well. So yeah, I knew him well, saw him play at Georgia. So it was just fantastic to be able to connect the whole Georgia-Chicago thing. And once again, Pace loves those dogs, those Bulldogs. So here we go again.
Yes. So speaking of that connection, I mean, if you're looking at Riley Ridley and Javon Wims, who both played together, I believe, for a season. Yep. So what do you like? What are the things that you see that are similar between the two guys, and what do you see that's different from watching them in the college game? And who do you think's better ultimately?
I think they're both very similar. I think Ridley, first of all, he is a big fan of Wims, and Wims really took him under his wing They have such a great connection. So I think him coming to Chicago, I think they said that he's never seen snow before, or he saw snow once. That's going to be a little transition for him coming to Chicago, but I think Wims is going to be a great mentor to him. On the field, I would say very similar. They're both guys that can get up and get the ball. They attack at the highest point, so I think that's where the similarities are. I think really is a little faster though than Wims. So I think from that standpoint, he's a guy that he can turn on those jets pretty quickly, and I'm looking forward to seeing that. A lot of patterns I think he's going to be running in terms of deep routes and that sort of thing to kind of, beat his man off the line. Where Wims can do it too, but I just think Ridley's got a little bit more speed. But great hands, great route runners, both of them. So the similarities are definitely there. And, obviously they were both coached up in the same organization at UGA. So it should be fantastic.
And how quickly before you actually had to announce it did you receive the pick and have the paper in your hands?
Yeah, so that was interesting too. I had no idea how much time you would have, and I wanted to, first of all, make sure I'm going to get a card. I'm like, I know obviously from watching the drafts all my life, you see the card comes out, they come up with the card. I got the card literally about 15 seconds before I had to make the announcement. So again, it goes back to what I was saying before about making sure that it's going to be a call, it's going to be a name that one, I can pronounce, and two, it's going to be, someone that I was familiar with. And I follow college football pretty well, so I wasn't as nervous there, but just making sure I was going to be able to pronounce the name accurately. And when I saw it, I was like, okay, this is great. Again, I know him and no issues, obviously, with the pronunciation. So I said, we're good to go. But, yeah, only about 15 to 20 seconds beforehand, so not a whole lot of time.
It's a good job we didn't get Ugachukwu Amadi then.
Right, exactly. I mean, hey, I would have done my best, but it would have been a little more difficult, that's for sure.
Terence, we're going to bug you again as the season progresses and get more of your take on the Chicago Bears. We loved having you on. Great job yesterday. Please become a friend of the Barroom. We'd love to talk with you further about the Chicago Bears.
Absolutely, yeah. I am now following you guys. I apologize that I wasn't beforehand, but I certainly am now, and I love your content. I was looking at it a little bit before the call today. So, yeah, definitely let's connect again. I'm a season ticket holder, my wife and I, for over 11 years now. So we'll be doing everything. We're actually going to the London game, matter of fact. So we'll be in London.
I'll see you there. I'll see you there.
Yep, absolutely. Let's talk.
All right. That is awesome news, Terence. And again, thank you very much for being on Bears Barroom. Take care now.
Thank you. Take care now. Go Bears.
I love the way he got that Go Bears in there. Danny, how much would you have paid to make that announcement yesterday?
Oh my goodness! So it's got to be like a lifetime achievement kind of thing. I was trying to ask him. I wanted to know, now that he's a celebrity status, he's catapulted himself to a celebrity. How many text messages and DMs and all that stuff did he get on his phone after he made the announcement? I was curious.
That is true. I mean, I can imagine it was in the dozens, and I'm so happy that he replied to my message. And again, lots of thanks to Greg Braggs for making that happen for us. All right, guys, we've got 15 minutes before we have another special guest on. So in this in these next 15 minutes, what I'd like to do is have you guys break down David Montgomery. But before I do that, I want to play some sound from yesterday's press conference with the brass talking about Montgomery.
The amount of times that he makes defenders miss inside the tackle box, he extends runs with his sheer power. He has a tremendous ability to feel when that next guy's coming, that peripheral vision. And then on top of all that, we've just done so much research on all these guys, and we've always talked about just high character guys, high character football players, that you'd like to go to that as much as you can, and this guy's at the top of the line with that. So he's the whole package, and then he has the hands, he's a 3-down back. He's everything that we're looking for.
Bearlissimo, talk to me about David Montgomery. How we didn't get your thoughts after he was drafted on Thursday night. What are your thoughts about him?
Well, my thoughts have changed actually since sort of looking at him pre-draft and looking at him post-draft. And the reason why that is because when you're looking at just a player and their traits and their abilities, you're kind of looking at, what is the upside, what is the downside, what do they do well, what do they need to work on. But what you don't really get into is who the person is. And post-draft, that's the thing that's really changed for me so much, because there's a documentary out there from his going to the draft with Hyundai, and that talks about his upbringing, in Cincinnati in really rough times, and a brother who's gone to jail, and that he doesn't want to waste his life and he wants to make every second count. And then you see a tweet from a father who's been to a special needs day at the stadium with the Iowa State Cyclones, and there's a picture of his kid who's just absolutely thrilled with delight at meeting him, and David was as thrilled as well as the kid was. I mean, and it was genuine. You saw it. It was just like a picture which has been snapped. And that, for me, was like one of the things that really changed about David Montgomery. But in terms of the player, he just does everything well. The only downside for him, for me, looking at him pre-draft, was the lack of a second gear. But, that's really sort of nitpicking. The guy gets to the hole and he gets through the hole really, really well. He's so slippery. His lateral agility is fantastic. He's patient enough as a runner, but equally he will do whatever he needs to do in terms of putting his body on the line to get the yards which are needed. And it's always as much as is absolutely physically possible. Catches well, blocks well, does everything well. So whilst, he might not have the flash of some of the other players, he's a guy that in the backfield you're going to be able to depend upon every single down. And off the field, I think you're going to be able to depend on him. You're not going to worry about, is he going to be kicking someone in the ass on a hallway of an apartment building at 4 o'clock in the morning. That's just not going to be him. This guy is going to be an absolute treat for Bears fans, both on and off the field, I think.
Well, speaking of his character, this is what was said yesterday about who he is, Matt Nagy at the podium.
He's about as real as a person as there is, very authentic, very passionate. It's funny when we sat down, and we had already met him at the combine, and so I like to be able to have some one-on-one with these guys too. And so he came in, and we sat down and talked, and I just like digging into a little bit of their personal history. Growing up as a kid, what position did you play? Things that you do, and we all do it, but just gets it going. And first thing he did was he stood up out of the chair, and like he was in a major interview, and he went through everything about himself, but everything that he talked about was extremely passionate, and there was a story behind it. There was a why, and I believed everything he said. There was no script to it. It was real, and the stories that he had, not only on the field but off the field, they make you realize what this kid's been through, and you appreciate that. You know that he's gone through a lot of adversity, and somebody that's been tested in that, to see how they react to it. This kid's overcome that. But the best part about it, when we were done talking, was that this is only the beginning for him, and this isn't something where he's made it. He was one of the things I took away from it. And remember, Ryan, I told you, I said, this kid, not even sure. He was telling me, and he was being real. He didn't even know exactly if he was going to get drafted. He doesn't like thinking like that. I'm going to get. He doesn't want to think about it. He just wants to work hard and control what he can control. And I thought that was it stood out to me.
Danny, as somebody who has filled out scouting reports on players, how important is character evaluation for a scout? Is that something that is routinely put up on scouting reports, Danny? And if so, what's your take on David Montgomery's character?
It is extremely important. That's one of the jobs that these scouts have. One of the important jobs is, besides going and watching tape, breaking down, the kid's athletic traits, his ability to fit within the system, his time, speed, so on and so forth, is what kind of kid is he? That's why you go back and you do all these research. You ask, when you go to do school visits, you ask, the athletic trainers, you ask, some of the administrative people, in terms of, anything you can get on him to know that, does this kid go to school? Does he not go to school? Does he get in trouble? So on and so forth. So that is a big part of evaluation, and not only football character, but also personal character as well. Is the game important to him? Does he take it seriously enough? Is he serious in practice? Does he practice hard? Things like that you gotta find out. And this is gonna be me repeating myself here. This is my top running back in the entire draft. I didn't think he was going to be available for the Bears to draft in the third round. So the fact that he was there, the fact that Ryan Pace went up and got him, I'm extremely, extremely happy about that. And then just like Bearlissimo just said, digging into his background, because obviously I'm not privy to that information, but now seeing some of him, seeing his character, his drive, his determination as an athlete, as a person, and it just makes me feel even better in terms of my on-field scouting report on this kid, because I know off the field he's going to fit in within this culture. He's going to be a guy that the Bears can rely on, and he's not going to be a guy that's going to be out there getting in trouble. Kareem Hunt, for example, something like that. He's going to be on the field. He's going to take it seriously. He's going to be someone that's going to be able to contribute immediately for this team.
We're going to talk a lot more about David Montgomery, but I want to get some of the chat room input here and questions. Gaines reporter, our man Tyler Ellis, one of the participants on the Bar Fight Tailgate Show, he wants to know from us, what battle at camp are you more interested in seeing? All this competition, I hope to see more tempers and emotion flare, like watching Larson and Hicks battle at the line. So I'll start with you, Bearlissimo. Tell me, what camp battles are you more interested in taking a look at?
I'm looking forward to seeing the DBs that we've brought in against the receivers that we've brought in. And there is a lot of attitude on both sides of the line now. I think there's going to be a lot of jawing backwards and forwards. But the other guy who I really like as well, Aldo, sort of shouting back to last year, Quentin Nelson, is Alex Barrs, man. He is an absolute beast. He's going to put people on their ass and let them know. And, it's not just going to be the guy in front of him. It's going to be literally anybody that doesn't have their head on a swivel. And the same for Stephen Denmark. He's going to really surprise and get under the skin of a lot of prima donna receivers. So I'm really looking forward to those battles. Thanks for the question, though.
You bet. And speaking of wide receivers, it was Steven Zimmerman who pointed out that, different Bears to catch a touchdown in 2019. You got Miller, you got Ridley, you got Gabriel, you got Robinson, you got Cohen, you got Burton, you got Sheehan, you got Montgomery, you got Davis, you got Mack, you got Jackson and Hall. I may have missed a couple, but that's about a dozen right there. Easy. Talk about that, Danny Shimon. What, training camp is going to, when we go down there to watch training camp, we're going to have to take video or look at Greg Braggs' video because there's going to be so many receivers to evaluate.
Well, one obvious omission from your list there is Bradley Soul. Santa Slay, right? That's the play that was
that's right.
The touchdown for him. But Bearlissimo, put it out there. The defensive backs that they brought in, the Duke Shelleys, this kid Stephen Denmark. I want to see, especially him. I want to see how he holds up against this top level competition. I mean, you put on this kid's tape, and I know it's a highlight tape, and it's called a highlight tape for a reason. But I mean, this kid is towering over people. He is blowing up, blockers. He is blowing up, blockers to get to the ball carrier. It's amazing. And for a kid who was a receiver, a majority of his career at college, and then to play, 1 year of defensive back, he just shows the natural awareness and instinct in the defensive backfield to be able to, make plays, to go up in high point of interception and then return it back for a touchdown. Like I said, in terms of him blitzing off the edge, I mean, this kid is a weapon. At 6'3", 220 pounds, runs a 4.46 with a 43-inch vertical. To be honest with you, I had never heard of him. When the pick was made, I'm like, who? And I pride myself of knowing as many of these prospects as I could. But I had to look up his tape, and man, when I saw this kid play, just the sheer athleticism, the sheer size, and the way he moves, I'm really interested in keeping my eye on him in training camp and see how he competes.
Yeah, Pace said that as much, that he wants he's going to be keeping an eye on that particular player during camp. Bearlissimo, any other players at camp that you are particularly intrigued by getting reports on? Because I know you're not going to travel down to Bourbonnais unless I pay for your ticket and room and board. And I can't do that. I got a wedding to pay for this summer. But what are you more interested? What are some of the other interests that you have in camp this season?
Yeah, I mean, a few of the lesser-known guys that we've sort of signed on the undrafted yesterday that really sort of piqued my interest. One is Thomas Ives, wide receiver out of Colgate, 6'5", 215 pounds, runs a 4.4, 840 with a sub 1.5 10-yard split. for a guy of that size to get off the line that quickly. And if you watch him on his tape, he's got shifty feet as well. He pitter-patters the first 10 yards and then really opens up his legs. There is no ball that he won't catch away from his body. He gets one-handed grabs. He's going to be an absolute highlight machine, I think, 1-versus-1 in the training camp battle. So he's going to be interesting to watch. And a guy I'd also like to sort of have a look at is, and again, it's not really very well mentioned, is Ellis Richardson. He is like a Trey Burton clone. Again, a guy who started out at QB, moved to tight end, 6'3", 240. He looks like he's a 4'5", 4'6" kind of range runner, but again, great at catching the ball. And I can see Nagy also giving some of those little shovel passes to him, getting him to throw some of the balls on these sweep reverses and passing downfield, all this crazy stuff that he does. So those two are guys, but the guy I'm really most looking forward to, and Greg, please get some video of him, is Adarius Pick 6 Pickett, because he is a nasty, nasty guy in the defensive backfield. He's like 5'11", 198. But he comes and he hits like a Steve Atwater reincarnated, or, Sean Taylor. The guy just wants to decapitate people. And when you listen to the actual game tape from when he's playing, you hear the pop, you hear the crack when he's hitting people on the field. So, and he's got ball skills as well. So please, Greg, get some video of him for me.
I love it. Hey, I want to get back to David Montgomery for just a second. Here is what Ryan Pace said when he was asked to compare Montgomery with Kareem Hunt, the Kansas City Chiefs running back that Nagy coached in his rookie season with the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah, there are some similarities for sure. You look at them and the size of them. You see how they run between the tackles. They're physical. They run angry, both of them. And I think the other connection is probably just, with the background of the coaches that they both had too. That's an easy tie there. But he's going to be his own person. I think that's the best part about David is the fact that the amount of talks that we had with him, you get to dig into who he is, and he's going to be David Montgomery, nobody else. And I think that's really important. We love that about him, and I'm excited to see really where it goes.
Danny, I want to get your thoughts on this comparison between Kareem Hunt and David Montgomery.
Yeah, it's very comparable. I mean, both have the ability, that the shiftiness to be able to make the first guy miss in the hole behind the line of scrimmage, and then once they get into the second level of defense, they have the ability to go ahead and create some separation from those defenders. Now, both of them actually ran very close to similar 40-yard dashes at the combine, but yet when you saw Kareem Hunt play, you saw him break away from the defender. You saw him take long runs for touchdowns. And another aspect of the games that are very similar is the pass catching aspect. Montgomery is probably one of the better pass catchers coming out of the backfield. He's got soft hands. And any type of catch you want to see on tape, he's got. Whether it's a swing pass out of the backfield, whether it's he runs a wheel route from the backfield, and catches the ball over his shoulder, looks it in. He does that. The other aspect of him is he's a very good pass blocker. Might be the best pass blocker in this draft in terms of a running back. He came from a system. I don't want to say similar to the Bears, but he came from a system Matt Campbell runs over Iowa at Iowa State. That's very RPO heavy, play action heavy, a lot of runs out of the shotgun formation. So I think he can come in and he can be an immediate contributor. And as a matter of fact, I was going to throw this out to you guys. I know they signed Mike Davis as a free agent, and Mike Davis might start the season as a starter, but I think that Montgomery has a chance to, by the time the season is over with, actually be the Bears starting running back. What do you guys think?
I see a lot of similarities between Mike Davis and the way he runs, that sort of lateral agility, and David Montgomery. And we've spoken about the sort of the similarities between Montgomery and Kareem Hunt, but what I'd like to look at is actually the differences, and that's that in the whole, Kareem Hunt's very much a downhill, certainly at Toledo and coming out, but he's sort of give him a slight juke and then sort of put his head down and dive at the really try and hit the guy who's in front of him. But David Montgomery, very rarely does anybody that's the first guy into the hole even touch him. His lateral agility is absolutely fantastic. And his ability to stop and start and go again at full speed in 2-3 steps is certainly different to Kareem Hunt in my view. But like you say, Danny, everything else he does is very, very similar on tape. His ability to catch, his want to block, his ability to block. He's a very, very good running back, like I say. He's very exciting.
All right, guys, I want to interrupt here because I want to bring in a guy who collects more W-2 forms at the end of the year than any one of us. I am certain of that. He is the reporter and anchor over at WCLO. I believe that's a radio station. He's an analyst for Pro Football Focus. He writes for NBC Sports Chicago and for the Bears Wire. And he's also the host of Locked On Bears. His name is Lorin Cox. He is a longtime friend of Bears Barroom. If I had a sound effect, I'd have a standing ovation sound effect. Lorin, welcome to Bears Barroom.
Hey, Aldo, I have to correct you. They're mostly 1099s, not W-2s.
Okay, that is correct. 1099s for freelancers. I get you. But welcome. I know you've been keeping busy. Love to see your tweets, and your Locked On Bears podcast is one that I think many of our followers listen to. You got it covered, and I knew you were going to be a success in this business when I first met you, Lorin. So I'm going to stop with the platitudes and jump to your evaluation of what the Chicago Bears did over this draft.
Well, I have kind of mixed feelings about it. Like overall, because it's so few draft picks. You talk about a draft grade and you try and compare it to other drafts and other draft classes. It's hard without a first or second round pick to come away feeling like, oh yeah, the Bears landed all this talent and they got so much better because they just didn't have as many opportunities to do so. But, when you kind of look at each pick individually and the value of each slot, I mean, there's a lot of upside with the later round picks, certainly some, best player available coming early in those first few rounds. So, overall, considering the capital that Ryan Pace had to invest in this draft, you got to feel pretty good with the way they came out of this one.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, Lorin, hi Lorin, it's Bayliss on Twitter, George from England on ESPN 1000. But one of the things that I sort of looked at this draft compared to the previous drafts of Pace's is that initially it was all about sort of talent acquisition with a view to starting. And for me, this draft was less about sort of looking primarily at getting starters, but with the fact we were drafting in the middle rounds to later rounds, it was a case of getting guys who could be starters but give a lot of upside compared to what they had in college. And I think we're going to see a lot of that, certainly with the later round guys after Ridley. It's guys who have the potential to have a high ceiling and come in as depth players now, but with the view that, if they do progress under coaching, that they're going to be guys who could compete in the future. I wonder what you think about that.
Yeah, that's sort of this next stage of the team building process, right? As the team gets farther away from free agency, and as Ryan Pace has said the whole time, free agency is supposed to sort of supplement the bigger team building in the draft, and so you kind of build from the bottom up instead of the top down at this point, and kind of preparing yourself that, okay, once these free agents currently under contract are ready to move on, as we see guys like Taylor Gabriel, Prince Amukamara, maybe Allen Robinson, and even Kyle Long in the next year or two, have contracts that are easy to get out of, the team starts to look to address those spots and from within and build a few years in advance. Like you said, I'm with you 100%. I think that's sort of an ideal stage for Ryan Pace when you get to this process in the team building sort of effort, that this is a good spot to be in, as it's sort of, I don't know if reloading's the right word, but kind of continuing to build for the future a little bit there, and not having to be so worried about making sure you hit certain positions or anything like that. He can really take another wide receiver in the fourth round if that's how the draft board falls to him.
Yeah, I mean, I see it less of a reload and more of a sort of keep the magazine full, really, in terms of what he's done. So, I mean, I wonder what you think as well about Riley Ridley and Javon Wims. Are we going to see both of them on the roster next year, do you feel?
Well, I don't know if there's enough room for everybody. I mean, it depends on what their vision of Cordarrelle Patterson might be, but I think certainly from a draft capital standpoint, when you invest that much more in Riley Ridley and just how the rest of the league might view them from a team building standpoint, you might feel like you could stash Javon Wims on the practice squad certainly a lot easier than a guy like Riley Ridley, who you just took in the fourth round. So there's no way you're going to leave Riley Ridley off of the roster at this point. So he's going to kind of plug in as your number 4 wide receiver. And then it comes down to special teams. And I look at Javon Wims' 2018 season. His first appearance on special teams was week 17 when he finally got the, more of a call up, more of a real role. He played a little bit on the punt return team as one of the rushers up near the line, and that's about all he got. So when you're trying to narrow down to your number 5 and 6 wide receivers there, I mean, you got Robinson, Gabriel, Miller, Ridley, and then Patterson sort of as a wide receiver running back hybrid. Then it comes down to, is Wims good enough to keep that 6th spot, or is a guy like Marvin Hall able to offer a little bit more on special teams? Or then 3 or 4 different receivers they added as undrafted free agents, a guy like Emmanuel Hall from Missouri. I think when it comes down to he or Javon Wims, boy, I like what I've seen from Emmanuel Hall too. So it's a great problem to have, but when it's a 7th round pick like that, there's just not enough invested in him there that I think the Bears are going to feel hamstrung to keep all these guys around. Speaking of Emmanuel Hall, have you ever seen a better undrafted free agent class? On paper, it really looks like, just an incredible group. And maybe that's a result of just the sheer numbers. There's a good chance that one or more of these undrafted free agents are going to outplay and have better careers than the likes of Duke Shelley and Steven Denmark and Kareth White as far as your late round draft picks, just because you've got, and I haven't seen a final number from last night on how many they ended up signing, but I know they were shooting for 18 to 20. So chances are that 1 or 2 of those 18 to 20, particularly those Notre Dame offensive linemen, a guy like Emmanuel Hall, you go down the list, chances are at least 1 or 2 of these guys is going to crack the 53-man roster and ultimately give you something pretty good down the stretch.
Hey, Lawrence, Danny, thanks for joining us this morning. Appreciate it. Hey, Montgomery to me was my top running back in this draft, and I'm under the impression that even though he was a 3rd-round pick and even though they signed Mike Davis as a free agent, I think he's got a chance to start the season. What do you think? Yeah, I don't think they're going to rush him along. I don't think that's been the Ryan Pace push at all. And there's certainly the luxury of having Mike Davis in here, but I think he's going to be a big part of the rotation right away. And there's always going to be some rotation. So what the quote-unquote starter looks like, we'll see exactly how defined of a role that is. But certainly Mike Davis will likely begin with the main share of the carries. But I do see a pretty clear path for David Montgomery to kind of take over in that top role. And maybe Mike Davis becomes a little bit more of what we envisioned for Jordan Howard, and Tariq Cohen continues to do his thing. But I'd like to see these running backs on the field together even more than we saw last season, whether that's just Cohen at receiver or putting a couple guys in the backfield, being able to motion them around. Montgomery's a guy that can line up in the slot as well. You're not going to want to rely on him to run a lot of routes downfield, but you can do some different things with him. So I see a lot of opportunity for creativity and some blurred roles as far as starter and backup, and maybe ultimately guys getting a similar number of snaps. But the question becomes who gets the carries and who gets the targets and who ends up with the most production. And I know with only a limited amount of picks, it's impossible for Pace and the Bears to address all their needs. But to me, edge rusher, or at least a backup edge rusher, is still somewhat of a concern. How do you feel about the depth at that position? And do you see any sort of post June 1st veteran cuts that could come available that the Bears might be interested in? Well, I think Ryan Pace's his inclination to add so many undrafted free agents makes me feel like they're a little bit less interested in trying to make too many more veteran additions. I think financially there's some incentive there as well. But I'm not thrilled with the outside linebacker depth. Aaron Lynch is back on a 1-year deal, and I think they're fine for 2019. I think between Khalil Mack, Leonard Floyd, Aaron Lynch, it is the same 6 guys. Well, I guess Josh Woods sort of wasn't there, but between Irving and Fitz and then the 3 top guys, it's the same 5 core players as you had last year. And boy, they sure got the job done then. But it is a little bit uncomfortable when you talk about moving forward into the future, because I still have questions about whether Leonard Floyd will be worthy of a long-term contract extension, although I imagine he's probably going to get it. But Aaron Lynch is going to be looking to move on again next offseason, and we'll see if he gets those opportunities again. And you want to have somebody there, like we were talking about with adding a wide receiver and all the draft picks in this draft, to kind of prepare to eventually replace guys in the future. You don't really feel great about the guys they do have. I've liked what we've seen from Isaiah Irving in the preseason, but it hasn't necessarily translated to regular season production. And Kylie Fitz just hasn't had a ton of opportunity at this point to show he's more than just a raw outside linebacker prospect. Obviously, the Bears feel pretty comfortable with them, and I understand that, but that's a position I would have liked to see addressed. But at the same time, Ryan Pace wasn't going to
specify, I think other than David Montgomery perhaps, he wasn't going to specify any position that he felt like he had to go and address. He was just going to let his board fall to him. He clearly was then feeling comfortable at pretty much every position to say, I don't need to draft anywhere on this roster. So if he ends up with no edge rushers, he ends up with no edge rushers, and he feels pretty good about the guys he has.
So with the invitees that we've had, Lorin, we now have 6 kickers in the kicker competition. Who's your favorite?
Well, at this point, it's hard to kind of, I mean, even Ryan Pace doesn't know exactly how this is going to shape out, but I don't know how you're going to be able to narrow this down at OTAs even. And that's what I don't like about the kicker competition strategy. I know he's limited from a financial standpoint with everything you've invested in Cody Parkey, and even from just an acquisition standpoint, the talent that was available, especially in free agency and such, and whatever's going on with Robbie Gould, there's limited talent to be acquired at the kicker position. But I don't know how you can really do a good, accurate's a funny word there, but a good representative kicker competition at OTAs and at training camp, even as you kind of narrow down, because as we know, you're kicking against air. You're not. They're going to try and create certain situations, but you just can't replicate both the Soldier Field conditions and the in-game pressure conditions. So, I would think a guy like Elliott Fry, just coming over from the AAF, having kicked in more of those in-game situations, not only in the NFL before this, but this off-season, being able to see some of those situations, even if it's not Soldier Field winter weather. To me, he's got the veteran experience. He's got to be the favorite for me. And then the San Diego State kid, whose name is total John Barron. To me, it's got to come down to probably those two guys, and the likes of Redford Jones and Chris Blewett. I mean, their bodies, and certainly give them every opportunity in the world. But I'm not confident that if those guys win a kicker competition in June and then in August, that they're going to be solid. And I'm not going to feel comfortable probably with any of these kickers when we get to the regular season, but I would feel even less comfortable with guys like that have never kicked in the NFL and have been out of college for quite some time. I mean, kickers that are decent usually end up sticking around on NFL teams, and the kickers that don't stick around on NFL teams usually don't for a reason, and bringing them in 2 or 3 years after they left college football doesn't give me a lot of confidence.
I agree with you there on the kicking position, because especially if the Bears are in this window where they're Super Bowl contenders, and if you're going to go into a season being a Super Bowl contender, going into it with a rookie kicker, to me, is a huge risk. So that's why I know they got 6 guys in here, like you said, 6 bodies, but I feel like there's going to be a veteran brought in, whether it's one of those guys that come off the caravan of kickers, or whether it's this whole Robbie Gould dream that a lot of Bears fans have. But I still feel there's going to be a veteran in here who's going to compete with these young guys, and I think eventually that person will be the kicker.
Well, go ahead, Aldo.
I know it wasn't Aldo, it's George.
Sorry.
One of the questions I wanted to ask you, sorry, I'm not sure you've fully addressed the previous one, but one of the questions I wanted to ask you is, with the guys that we've signed and the guys that have come in on the undrafted free agency, who is now on the bubble? Who should really be looking over the shoulder?
Well, we talked about Javon Wims. Certainly, I would put him in that conversation. Taquan Mizell and Ryan Nall, definitely with the depth that they added at the running back spot. But to me, that's about it as far as like the real. I mean, it's going to be your bottom of the roster guys. I mean, your Tanner Gentrys and your maybe even Marvin Hall coming in free agency, and on the offensive line, Deshaun Allen probably doesn't stand much of a spot anyway, and Cornelius Lucas as well with some of the offensive linemen they brought in. But this roster is so solid, even too deep, and it's not that they have 2 deep starters, but that they have depth that you feel pretty good about at most positions on this roster. I don't really see a ton of guys that are both quality players and looking over their shoulder and concerned about the depth coming in behind them. Certainly anything is possible with some of these undrafted free agents that can come in and push them up with some guys over the top. I mean, maybe Kevin Tolliver, as far as a bigger name, quote unquote, that could be feeling some pressure. Maybe DeAndre Houston Carson and Deion Bush, but at the same time, again, we're talking undrafted free agents, and you just don't know. So I don't know how, as much as there's so many bodies at the undrafted free agent position, and chances are a couple of those guys find a spot here or there. There aren't a lot of spots for those guys to find, just with how solid some of this veteran depth is on this roster. So it's a great position for the Bears to be in, and it's a tough spot for all these undrafted free agents. But I would guess the Bears are going to end up putting together a pretty darn strong practice squad when the preseason's all said and done.
One of the guys that I was looking at from the undrafted free agents list, and certainly in terms of the production and the depth, was at the tight end position. Dax Raymond, I think, is a really good get as an undrafted free agent, and I'm not sure whether Braunecker or Shayne should really feel confident in their positions.
Yeah, I think 100%. I think even if Adam Shaheen shows no further development, the Bears don't seem like the kind of team that would cut bait from Shaheen so early. I think he certainly is in a real risk of losing playing time on the field, but I think they're kind of willing to hold on to him for at least most of the duration of his rookie contract, just on the off chance that things are still going to continue to develop here. And I'm not writing him off at this point; it's too early in his career. But certainly Ben Braunecker, right there in that conversation. The tight end spot is so important in this Matt Nagy offense, and there was only really 3 guys under contract, heading into this draft. So yeah, they could keep all 4, to be honest with you. And Braunecker doesn't have. Might not lose his spot, especially because he's a guy they can play at the fullback spot, and if they want to, for as little as they use a fullback. And I don't believe they ever addressed that position this offseason. So Braunecker's versatility could give him some value there, and Shaheen's lack of development might leave Matt Nagy inclined to jump in and make sure he's got 4 tight ends in here, just because Shaheen can't necessarily take too deep of a role there.
Lorin, one of the things I like about you is that you take a real level-headed approach to this team. I know how much you love the Chicago Bears, but you carry around with you a healthy amount of skepticism. So having said that, what are your expectations for the Chicago Bears in 2019?
Well, in April, I try not to get too just specific in, record predictions and game-by-game predictions. But I do feel like this team probably won't go 12-4 again. That doesn't mean they won't win the NFC North again, but 12-4 is a tough record to maintain back-to-back. I'm expecting a few fewer wins and, a few more mistakes here and there. I think the defense won't be as good as it was last year, but still very, very good. I think the offense will be better than it was last year, but maybe not, out of this world just yet. And so, I think that leaves you maybe a slight step lower. And so many things went well last season, and so many things seem to all kind of go right at the same time. And chances are that not all those things are going to go right, whether it's, players staying healthy. The team was so relatively healthy last season, or hitting some opponents. The Vikings aren't going to be, in theory, as disappointing as they were last year. The Packers, in theory, aren't going to be as disappointing as they were last year. And, there were just a lot of things that seemed to go well for the Bears, and so many things don't always go that well. So I'm predicting a slight step back, but still right in that same conversation of, towards the top of the NFC North, competing for that crown down the stretch, competing for that playoff spot down the stretch, and likely probably sneaking back into the postseason, and we'll see where they can go from there.
Quite possible that they could have fewer wins but be a better team.
Yeah, that's a good point as well. Wins aren't always the pure measurement of how good a team is.
Just get into the playoffs, and Lorin Cox will be following your commentary on all these various channels of communication that you have. Why don't you take 20 minutes or so to plug everything that you're working on?
I'll go with the short version for you. On Twitter, @CoxSports1. I always say it's Fox Sports 1, but with a C. You can hear me on the Locked On Bears podcast. You can read my Bears work at NBC Sports Chicago and The Bears Wire.
Thank you very much for carving out some time for us, Lorin. And remember, we love you and miss you here at the Barroom.
Hey, anytime you need me, I'll be over there.
Thank you, brother.
Thanks, Lorin.
Danny, do you share that sense of caution that Lorin has about the upcoming season?
Yeah, I do. Not saying the Bears are going to take a step back, but like Lorin said, there's going to be, it's a tougher schedule, right? They were a predominantly healthy team last season. There's going to be bumps in the road in terms of injuries. There are going to be possibly some more games missed from key starters, So that's why depth is so important with this team, just to, next man up mentality. One guy goes down, the other guy, steps in, and the train keeps on going. I think that NFC North is going to be better this year. I think, I expect the Vikings to have a bounce back season and be a better team this year. The Lions, second season under their new coaching staff, should be better. Packers, are going under some sort of, rebuild here on the fly kind of, but they're bringing in a lot of veterans, improving that defense. I mean, they went heavy defense both in free agency and the draft. You still have Aaron Rodgers there. No matter what we think of him as a person, he's still one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. So you're right. That the Bears might not win 12 games this season. They might win 10 or 11. But like you said, Aldo, just either win a division or get in the playoffs is all that really matters. The amount of victories I really don't care about unless you're obviously battling for home field advantage for the playoffs. But they could take a step back, but still be just as good, if not better.
Bearlissimo, what are your thoughts?
Well, I'm not such a sourpuss, Aldo. I'm afraid that I don't see a lot of the things that Detroit Lions, they had one of the most mystifying drafts that I think I've seen out of everybody. They are a dysfunctional franchise. I don't see any improvement from them. The Vikings, one of the things about their head coach, which has been nailed on, and we've had them in our back pocket for the last few years, their defense is getting older. They have improved the offensive line, I think, in the draft. But at the end of the day, they still have Kirk Cousins at QB. I'm not that worried about the Vikings, certainly in pressure situations, games that they must win against us. The Packers, I really do genuinely believe, the wheels could really come off this year for them. They could be anywhere between a 12-4 team and a 4-12 team for me. And the reason why I say that is because Rodgers seems to want to run everything on the offense, and now you've got a new guy who's been brought in for offense and his scheme and what he's going to produce. And I think there's only one guy who wants to lead in that room there's only one guy that wants to lead that franchise the most, and that's Aaron Rodgers. And I'm not sure whether that relationship between the new head coach, first head coaching gig, young guy as well, butting up against Aaron Rodgers and the dysfunction that is in the Packers at the moment. So I think division-wise, I think we're going to win division. I think 12-4 is a realistic possibility. I also think that we're going to win at least one of the two games against the Saints and the Rams. So I think we're going to potentially be in the running for home field advantage, everyone listening. And I think the Bears are going to go all the way to the Super Bowl. So there you go.
I love Bearlissimo.
But the one thing you got to consider, though, is tougher schedule. Okay? Yeah. Your opponents are going to get better. Right. I mean, whether the Lions are going to be, a 10-win team or a 4-win team, they are going to be. It's a second year under the coaching staff. They should be better. And then nutrition. Last year they were really healthy. For that to happen again, it's rare in the NFL. So that's the thing. I'm seeing that as possible. I still think the Bears are going to be the cream of the crop in terms of division, but it's still going to be for them to take a step back in terms of wins and losses. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're a bad team or if they've taken a step back as a team. They can still be a Super Bowl contender. It's just that we're talking about 12-4 as opposed to going 11-5, something like that.
Okay, so 12-4. I mean, how many games did the defense actually win for us last year? Yeah, they kept us in games and they kept scores close, so the offense didn't have to produce that much.
And that's a good point right there, because we've lost Fangio. We've lost Fangio. That's going to be a step back, I think.
But we haven't lost any of the players, and we've got a guy here now who's more aggressive for me in Pagano. And the thing is with me for the defense is that scheme is ingrained in all of them. And what he's going to bring is sort of nuance and slight changes to the defense. So I'm not worried about the defense dropping off a little bit. Health thing, yeah, Danny, that worries me. It worries me every single season with the Bears because we've been so bitten by it in the past that, to not be afraid by injuries would be remiss. But for me, the crucial thing that's going to make a difference to the Bears this year is we've added, I would say, 1 to 2 wins in special teams if we can get anything like a kicker. Certainly in the return game, we're going to be in much better field position, I believe, this year than last year. And I think in terms of everything else, I think that remains the same on special teams. But the key component, the crucial thing, is everybody has been in the system for 2 years other than the rookies. Everybody has had that development with Nagy and more ingrained into exactly what Stan wants on the offensive line, and we've seen improvements there. The offensive line is going to gel better. Trubisky was ascending for me in the end of the season. I think Nagy flinched in the playoffs more so than Trubisky. I thought Trubisky in that second half, he showed the crucial things, which is massive cojones. The guy played like he had balls of steel in that second half against the Eagles. Yeah, he had 1 or 2 bad throws. The guys had an injury mid-season. I see a massive ascendancy from Mitch Trubisky this year, and the amount of weapons he now has out wide and in the backfield, I see a massive improvement on the offense, Danny, and that's the reason why I think the 12 wins is entirely realistic. And I think our defense isn't going to drop off that much, but our offense is going to be significantly more explosive. I wonder what you think.
Yeah, the offense will need to be more explosive this season. That's for sure.
Yeah, I this is a great debate, guys, because I'm sort of, I'm sort of agreeing with both of you. I have a healthy amount of skepticism too, but I also have a large amount of optimism because I'm projecting that things are going to get better, and my projections are based on facts. And of course, the Mitch Trubisky being the key part of this is that after a year of being on Nagy's offense for a full season and looking at his athletic abilities and his desire to be great, I think he's going to really have a sensational season. So we could see a team that only wins 10 games but be a much better team, especially when it comes to the playoffs. So fascinating discussion. I can't wait for the season to start. That's when we're going to get the true answer. And then regarding the schedule, Danny brought up the schedule. Last year at this time, we were talking about how tough that schedule was for 2018, and it ended up being favorable for the Chicago Bears. So anything can happen between now and the start of the season and even the middle of the season with player injuries, with players and teams not playing up to expectations and so forth. So what I consider, the biggest challenge of this schedule is the fact that, there have so many games that start outside that noon Central Time start that the players are accustomed to. This is the schedule of a team that the league has high expectations for. But conversely, we've got a head coach who knows how to prepare a team for this challenging schedule because they relish it. I remember Lovie Smith. I think it was Lovie Smith saying, we don't like playing games in prime time. Whereas Nagy is the total opposite. We love it. We embrace it because it means that people have high expectations. People think that we're good. So I think that's a really good point here.
Aldo, I mean, the thing for me is that what did Mitch show us? He was the anti-Parky for me last year. Parky under pressure, cracked and crumbled, and he fell to bits. Mitch Trubisky, the more pressure you put on him last year, the better he got. And that's the thing for me, is that's the thing that he has. Yeah, he still will throw some interceptions. Yes, he still will make some mistakes and some reads. But what he will do is improve. What he will do is learn from those mistakes. What he will do is just under the pressure is absolutely shine. I mean, that's the thing that he showed for me, certainly towards the end of the year. I couldn't have been more enthused about him. But like I say, I see us being so much better in terms of starting field position, from the defense still playing as well, but our return game being better, for having more speed threats and better receiving threats than we've ever had before. Certainly in my living history memory, we've got better receivers now than we've ever had as a group. And in the backfield, we've got guys who are not only a threat to run the ball, but are a threat to catch the ball, or a threat to throw the ball. And that for a defense is an absolute nightmare. There's nothing worse as a defensive coordinator than looking at an offense and not knowing what you're seeing. Depending upon the shifts and who's going to be in the backfield. Is it going to be Cohen in the backfield? Is he going to flex out? Is Cordarrelle Patterson going to make motion into the backfield from out wide? It's just so difficult to plan for as a defense, and hesitancy is the thing that kills defensive teams. Hesitancy, not knowing what you're seeing, is really what you're going to get, and that's the thing about Nagy's offense that we're going to see a lot more of this year. And Mitch Trubisky as a QB, I couldn't be more enthused about him. Yeah, he's still going to make mistakes, but the guy absolutely shines under pressure, and that's the crucial thing that you need from any QB.
Danny, I'll give you the last word on this topic, and then we'll move on to talk about some other things.
Yeah, Bayliss makes a great point in terms of the extra boost in the special team in the return game with Cordarrelle Patterson, and I do also expect the Bears to take a step up in terms of their offensive efficiency, in terms of their points scored per game. But I guess I might be in the minority here, guys, because I think Fangio was a huge loss, and that's one of the the effects of this Parkey kick, minus losing the playoff game and so on and so forth. But he cost us Vic Fangio. I truly believe that if he'd made that kick, the Broncos were not awaited for Fangio, and Fangio would still be here as a defensive coordinator. To me, that's a huge loss. And yes, it's the same players, and Pagano comes in and he says, he's going to do the same scheme, but it's a different play caller. It's a different guy. Fangio had a way of putting these guys in the position to succeed, right? And whether we agree with him and dropping guys back on certain calls and not bringing enough pressure or blitzing, we cannot dispute the fact that he was one of the top defensive coordinators and still is defensive minds in the NFL. And I think losing him is going to take a step back. How far back? I don't know. Are they going to be a top 5 team, a top 10 team in terms of defensive rankings? Who knows? But I think there'll be a step back. And that's where we're going to rely more on the offense to give us more points. So that way, we can continue winning. That's I guess those are my areas where I'm seeing I have some trepidation there. I have some concerns there. But yeah, in terms of, offensively taking a step up, I do expect that. And yes, the extra boost from the return game, I expect that as well. I'm just worried so much, like the schedule is going to be tough, although like you mentioned with the different times and the step back. How far back are we going to take defensively?
We could talk about this for the next 2 hours. I'll have the last word on this before we move to the next topic. I'm not so much concerned about Vic Fangio's exit. Vic Fangio, if he didn't have Khalil Mack last season, he would still be the defensive coordinators of the Chicago Bears. And I see Bearlissimo nodding. This is more about the talent on the defense. And Chuck Pagano is no effing idiot. He's going to come here and he's going to know what to do. He's going to mix things up. And then another point, I can go back and count the amount of times that Vic Fangio made a play call, and I was like, what the F? And I know you, Danny, could, and I see Bearlissimo applauding my comment. He was not immaculate. He was not flawless in his play calls. He made mistakes. So my hope is that Chuck Pagano, if he makes the same amount of mistakes that Vic Fangio did, then we could potentially be a better team because of the progress of young players moving forward. So let's land it at that. And I know Danny is like saying, man, I want to say.
I want to. I'm bursting here. I got to come back, but I'll wait. I'll hold on.
Shut up, Danny.
Okay, I do want to talk, and you guys were talking with Lorin about the kicking situation. And yesterday at the press conference, Matt Nagy was asked about the process of dealing with all these kickers in camp and how are you going to give them time to prove themselves and so forth. And so I want to play this soundbite and then have you guys react to this.
Well, I think I said before, we're going to figure out ways as we go from here on out to create competition and create pressure situations, not just in that area, but as a team. So we might get creative at times. Y'all may be a part of that. You may not be. You can think about that for a little bit. Don't worry, I already got a plan. We'll let it know. I'll let you know when it comes out. But no, we're gonna have some. We're gonna let these guys got to compete, right? Get them out there, compete, and it's not going to be kicker specifically, right? It's not going to be an easy competition. It's about making your kicks under pressure, and it's as simple as that. You either make it or you don't. So we're gonna test them out.
Is there a timeline for whittling it down, and how do you guys guard against evaluating everything through nervous eyes, if that makes sense?
Yeah. Obviously, Ryan will have a big say in that, and we'll talk through that. I don't know if there's a right answer right now because I think that's a feel thing. You get to get a feel on how these kickers are doing. Tabes will be a huge part of that in that deal. But I'm excited. I'm excited to see how that goes. And then it'll all play itself out. I know it will, and Ryan and I have had long discussions about that. But I can promise you that Ryan's done an amazing job with his personnel scouts of trying to figure out and turn every rock and see who's out there, and then give them a chance and let's go.
Danny, I'm going to give you the first shot here at commenting on Nagy's process for choosing a kicker and just your overall thoughts about the talent that's been brought in here to compete for the field goal kicker job.
I heard that a lot yesterday, and I kind of agree with what Lorin had said. Is like, all right, you can try and create this competitive atmosphere, this nature for these kickers to try and compete and to win this job, but it's not the same thing as doing it, at Soldier Field amongst all those crowd, all those fans screaming and the pressure of making a kick, like for example, Parkey, to advance in the playoffs and stuff like that. So it's going to be different. I'm interested in seeing what type of competition he creates for these kickers. But another thing is, and we don't have it here, I don't know if you have it there, Aldo, but Ryan Pace didn't shoot down bringing in a veteran. And that's why I mentioned to Lorin, I said, if you're a Super Bowl contending team and you're going into a season thinking you're going to have a chance to win this championship, it's going to be damn hard to go in there relying on a kicker, a rookie kicker, to make these crucial kicks for you down the stretch. And no matter how great you are, you're going to need crucial kicks to be made. Now, one of these guys could turn out to be, who knows, a future All-Pro. I don't know. No one knows. But if you're going in, with the idea you're going to compete for a championship, you better be damn sure that your kicker can make crucial kicks. And the fact that Pace did not shoot down the possibility of bringing in a veteran, I still have some. It might be dim, but I still have some hope that maybe this whole Robbie Gould thing might end up working out some way or somehow.
Bearlissimo.
Yeah, my only concern with Robbie Gould is yes, he's absolutely clutch in terms of his history kicking at Soldier Field, his accuracy, his leg isn't what it used to be. The one thing I would say about some of these rookies that have brought in, they've been at Cole's kicking camps. And I don't know if you've seen those, Danny and Aldo, but one of the things that they do is they have a competition where you keep moving the distance back, you keep moving the hash, and you have one attempt. It's make it or go home, make it or go home. And two of these guys have actually won those camps, which is Blewett and Barroom. That both of those guys have won those kicking camps in the past. So my only one of the things I do have that I see as a potential issue is that Barroom is a left-footed kicker. That's completely different for the holder. I mean, most holders are used to holding for right-footed kickers. And I know it sounds like a relatively simple, minor thing, but I think that's going to affect the outcome of the kicking competition. But whether it's a veteran or whether it's a rookie kicker, for me, the key thing is that critical component which Robbie Gould does definitely have, and that's the clutch gene. That's the ability to shut out everything else, to not hear the noise, to not see the crowd. And in terms of crowd noises at the kicking competition, we're going to have 6 guys shouting against each other, I would have thought, which is all the other kickers. So that's going to maybe add some of the crowd noise that might replicate some Soldier Field experiences. But I don't see any of these guys being he who shall not be named. But certainly I am enthused because a lot of these kids that have come in, they have absolute cannons for legs. 63, 64-yard field goals in game conditions. I think Blewett hit a 63-yarder in triple overtime to win a game. So these guys do have some clutch about them, and every kicker has to start somewhere. So whether we bring in a veteran who's done it for a long time but might be on the downside of their career and might cause problems that way, or whether we have a rookie who's going to, an absolute cannon for a leg but might suffer with nerves, it is a question mark. But you have to trust the guy that you have and have confidence. And the one thing I do have confidence in is Nagy and Pace in being able to identify who that guy is.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that Dan Wiederer of the where's he write for? One of the newspapers in town. He sort of took a shot at Ryan Pace yesterday, saying, given the scars that you have with the kicking position, and basically said, you haven't done a good job of picking kickers. But I do have to say this, in Ryan Pace's defense. Signing Cody Parkey last year, and I know Shayne was not a big fan of the signing, but signing Cody Parkey wasn't a terrible move. Yeah, we can argue that he overpaid him. That I would agree with everybody. But Cody Parkey had a fairly good NFL career. coming into the Chicago Bears, and he just didn't. I don't think he ever played as poorly with an NFL team as he did with the Chicago Bears. Now, another point I want to get across is some of these kickers. I've always been of the opinion, well, if they're not in the NFL already, they've been tooling around, and I know you guys have talked about this. If they've been tooling around in other leagues or sitting out of the NFL for a while, then they're probably not going to cut it in the NFL. Well, I'm not totally right on that. That has been disproven. Robbie Gould, for instance, was an undrafted free agent who was around for a while. He was signed by the Chicago Bears, and he's going to perhaps be the greatest NFL field goal kicker of all time, at least statistically. So, who knows with this group of 4 or 5 guys that they're going to bring in. And then one last point. Greg Gabriel and I talked recently, and I've heard this echoed by some other people, is this kid, Chris Bluet, he's got there's a certain thing about this guy that he, in my mind, is the leader to end up winning this job with the Chicago Bears. He's going to be, we talk about, camp battles that we're going to look at. I'm going to be looking at Chris Bluet to see if the power off of his foot is indeed what has been described to me, and also whether he's got the accuracy necessary to become a top-notch kicker in the NFL. So that's going to be a really fascinating development throughout training camp. We've got 2 minutes here before we're scheduled to bring Adam Rank in. Guys, give me your final thoughts on the kicker position, because typically we lose listeners when we're talking about kicking on a podcast, but in this case we actually gain some listeners because everybody's so upset about the Cody Parkey thing. So to finish up your thoughts, and then we'll bring Adam Rank in.
I mean, one thing I would like to say is someone who's kicked in rugby, one of the things that you always notice with kickers, and it's the same with golf, Aldo, is the further and harder you can hit a ball, the less effort you have to put into it to make it from shorter distances. And that's the absolute critical thing. Tiger Woods does not need to worry about the wind when he's hitting an iron shot into the green, because he can drill it. The distance is no issue for him. And when distance is no issue, you can focus on form and technique. And that's the critical component. The only other thing that you can't allow for is that mental issue. And that's whether they can shut everything else out, just focus on the job, not have to worry about, is this on the edge of my range? And, so like you said, Blewett's hit a 63-yarder in triple overtime to win a game in college. The guy has the leg to do it. And he doesn't, from 50 yards in, he doesn't have to worry about distance. Justin Tucker doesn't need to worry about distance. Greg Zuerlein doesn't need to worry about distance. And that's the key component for me. Where it's on the edge of the range, where you're 52, 53 yards, you're having to put everything into the kick and get the technique right. That's much harder than if you can kick a 60-yard ball. You're not having to try so hard from 50.
Annie?
Yeah, and then it's Bluet, by the way, not Blewett. So that's what we're going to go with here. It just sounds much better.
Oh,
but,
it sure does.
But again, one of these kids, whether it's Bluet or Redford Jones or Fry, I mean, one of these kids could be the answer. I mean, and I certainly would be more than welcome to have these guys, answer this issue long term. But I just still feel like, man, if you are a Super Bowl contending team, you need to go in with a veteran. It might not be Robbie Gould. I mean, that's a pipe dream. But some veteran who's done it before in the clutch. That's what I'm thinking, because you put this kid in a situation and you can try. And I know, Bearlissimo, you said that, in the training camp, the fans and other players all screaming at him, all that stuff. It's not the same, man. It's not the same as you're in front, of a win-lose situation at Soldier Field or in any NFL stadium where you have, fans and everybody, all eyes on you. I just feel like if you are a young developing team, yeah, you can take a chance on a kid who hasn't, done it before. But man, if you're a team that's ready to win now, and now is your window, you got to go with a veteran. That's how I feel. I think eventually a veteran will be in here.
Volder Parkey was a veteran.
True.
Yes, good point. Hello? Hey, guess who's in the barroom? It's Adam Rank, and we really need him at this point because we've been talking about kickers for the last 15 minutes. So save us, Adam Rank. Save us.
Oh my gosh. We're not going to be doing kicker talk here. I think we're moving past that, please. I think that, it's been unfortunate because that is one of the things that has been dominated. You can't even go on social media. Like, everybody thinks they're so clever. You post anything, you're like, hey, I like this draft pick. I thought this was a good move. And then some haters got to roll in. Oh, double doink. Like, okay, fair enough. But I'll tell you this, Packer fan, at least everybody likes our quarterback, and he didn't get our coach fired. So I think that we're okay. The double doink is a thing that perhaps someday we'll be able to look back on and laugh and have a good time about. But, right now we just got to wear it. But let's move forward. Let's move forward because so many great things happened over this weekend.
Yeah, especially watching Rashawn Gary cry when he was selected by the Green Bay Packers.
Oh, yeah. He's like, I got to live in Wisconsin. This is the way. I feel you. I understand. Nobody wants to do that. The brave men and women who have to endure that struggle every day, we feel for them, And so, I understand where he was coming from. So I would have felt the same way if I had to move to Green Bay.
Adam, I want to let you know that we've got a couple of other co-hosts with us. Danny Shimon is our senior draft analyst, and George Bayliss, who we call Bearlissimo, is calling in from England. You know Bearlissimo, right?
Of course. What a thrill.
Adam, what a thrill for me, man. I think you're one of the best people on the NFL Network. So absolutely thrilled to speak to you, mate.
Oh, the pleasure is all on this side of the phone. I'm tearing up. I'm glad that we're not on camera because I'm like, this is huge. Like, what a great moment for me. So, wow, what a star-studded cast. I don't know why you need me on. I'm ruining the party. I'm now the guy that's like, oh, God, this guy's here? But
not at all.
So I apologize.
We desperately want to get your take on, you mentioned all the great things that have just happened for the Chicago Bears. Tell us what your feelings are about this 2019 Chicago Bears draft.
Well, I understand a lot of times that perhaps I come off as a little bit of a homer because I tend to take a more positive outlook for things. And, but to be quite honest, if there were things that weren't going well, I would certainly call it out and say, this is not something I would have done. I wouldn't have done this. I wouldn't have gone there. And I'm not afraid to be critical when I need to be. And I don't think that you can look at this draft and find anything that stands out of like, what is Ryan Pace doing? I understand there's a number of people out there who are like, I don't like the value of, I'm like, okay, I understand. Sometimes that happens. I'm at Disneyland with my daughter. And sure, could I buy this, frozen accessory kit on Amazon for a few bucks cheaper? Of course. But sometimes in the moment, you're creating a memory. You got to do what you got to do. Like, okay, I'll pay the extra $4. It's at the end of the day, it's not going to ruin me. It's not going to bankrupt me. And it's not like Ryan Pace bankrupt the franchise to move up to get David Montgomery. The most important thing to me is that he held on to both number 2 selections for 2020. So I think, okay, as long as we came out of the draft with those 2 picks and a bevy of studs, I think that it was a worthwhile afternoon or a couple of days, I should say. And David Montgomery, I got to be honest with you, when this came up, I was legit excited. It was like watching the Royal Rumble and a wrestler you hadn't seen before comes out. And you're like, oh my gosh, this guy's here, and you pop. Like that was kind of the sentiment that I had because out here on the West Coast, you get an opportunity to see these Big 12 games at 9 a.m. out here, and Iowa State is always one of those teams that play. And David Montgomery was just a fun player to watch. The receiver there was also very good too, and it's the Cyclones, so they're not a big name franchise who's going to be on prime time, and College Game Day is not going to be there. But these guys are good players. And Montgomery is a really good player, and I think the fit for the team is perfect. And I understand I'm in agreement with a lot of people that I was kind of bummed out to see Jordan Howard go. But I really like David Montgomery, and I feel that it's unfortunate because the comparison, at least on the field, is going to be to a former Kansas City Chiefs running back. So, but I think skill-wise, like that's pretty apt that he can catch the ball. His 40-time, like you get these 40-time truthers out there who just are so involved in that because I never watched the game and thought that he looked slow. So I thought that was a great pick. I like the Calvin Ridley thing. I think that, and if I'm going on too long, I apologize. I'm just excited. But the thing is like a couple of years ago, we were bringing out like some curtain jerkers at wide receiver. And you're like, who is going to catch the ball for this team? And now you look at the overall depth. You know what I'm saying? Like the overall depth of the position. Now you're like, holy mackerel! Like there's a lot of guys. Like Allen Robinson, I think, is one of the best in the game. Taylor Gabriel was really good last year. Anthony Miller is coming on. It's like, oh, okay, yeah. So this is the thing. Like with these new offenses, we've got to surround ourselves with top wide receiver talent, and I think he went out and did that. And, you know, of course, some of the later picks, I'll be honest, the kid from Kansas State, I didn't watch a lot. I didn't see him a lot. I'm now going back and trying to get some more. And it's one of those things that, again, when you're watching on Saturday morning, you're not watching Big 12 football and being like, there's a lot of defensive superstars out here. But what I've seen so far has looked pretty good. I'll rely on the draft experts on that one, but I'm like, hey, this doesn't seem terrible to me. So overall, I thought for a team that didn't have a pick in the first 2 rounds, I thought this was a tremendous draft.
You know, I love your analogy there, Adam, about Ryan Pace and you talking about purchasing that item for your daughter. Ryan Pace does strike me as the type of guy that when he was a kid and he said, Mommy, I want some cotton candy, and Mom would say no, he'd figure out a way to get that cotton candy. Because this guy, you know, he has, you know, cojones, the size of Mexico. He just goes out there and gets his guy. And that is such a pleasure to see in a general manager after we had GMs who want, we had one guy who wanted Aaron Donald and just sat on his ass and didn't do anything to move up in the draft to get his guy. So it is really a pleasure to see Ryan Pace at work.
That was one of the, I don't want to humble brag, but I was at Radio City Music Hall that year. And I was sitting there. We used to do these correspondence on the red carpet. I was with a young lady named Megan Collins. She was she's style girlfriend, and that was our thing. And so we were talking, you know, and and she's like, oh, you know, she's not a huge football fan. So I'm like, oh, you should come check it out. And we had happened to make our way to the crowd when the Bears were about to make the Rams were obviously going to make the pick. And I was sitting there talking, and I had a piece of gum in my mouth. And it flew out. I was so enraged when the Rams were able to steal Aaron Donald. And she's trying to figure it out. She's like, what is happening? I go, I can't explain to you the how troubling it is, because every mock draft that year had the Bears taking Donald. It was you could go back at every single one of them. And it's like, you know, at some point when you play your cards that early, somebody's going to jump up. And when it was the Rams, who at that point didn't really have a need for defensive line, they needed help everywhere. So it was kind of a surprise. It was kind of shocking that nobody had moved ahead previously. But to just think that he was going to, you're like, oh, here's a team who's like, oh my God, what are they doing? And that was one of the most disappointing things draft-wise over the last decade I can think of. But you know what? It's all working out now.
It really is. And, you know, this team, talk to me about how you see the depth of this team working out. I mean, we had Greg Gabriel, a friend of Bears Barroom, the former scouting director of the Chicago Bears. He said that, you know, some of these undrafted free agents were guys that should have been drafted in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round and so forth. You know, we got Dax Raymond, who Danny Shimon, the co-host on this show, and I saw up close at the Senior Bowl, and we're just blown away by his capability of inline blocking and also getting down the seams to catch passes. This UDF class, this 2019 draft haul of these 5 players, talk to me about how confident you are that this team has Super Bowl depth to withstand, you know, some injuries or, you know, some player, you know, not playing up to expectations.
Yeah, this is really one of the things where you end up making your mark. And I think that you can look at the most successful NFL franchise over the last 20 years, perhaps over the last 100 years. The New England Patriots, it was interesting to me. There was an infographic that was floating around about teams that had drafted the most Hall of Famers since 1967. Steelers number 1, Bears number 2, and I think it was the Rams who were number 3. And the thing that stood out is that as successful as New England has been, they were not on this list. And a reason why is because they're able to find players deeper in drafts or, of course, unrestricted, undrafted free agents who just come out of seemingly nowhere. And you think of some of the best, undrafted free agents of all time. Tony Romo comes to mind. You think of Antonio Gates, your players like that. And I'm not going to just go out there and compare this current crop of Bears players to those elite players, but there is some value here. And I think that, even somebody like Emmanuel Hall or Dax Raymond, or Alex Bars or any one of those guys, especially Alex Bars, this is the time where you make the most out of your roster, because we all know the superstars. We all know, hey, you traded up for a quarterback, you traded for Khalil Mack. We all know Allen Robinson. But you think about who have been key players for the Bears over the last couple of years. And you think of like Tariq Cohen, obviously he was a 4th-round pick. Eddie Jackson was a 4th-round pick. And it's finding these guys and finding these values who are able to exceed. And that is one of the things that I've noticed, going back and looking through and seeing the names come off the board and the guys that they were able to get. And you're like, God, like this was a pretty nice little haul. This again just shows that Ryan Pace just does a remarkable job, like, of going out and finding and unearthing these talents. And perhaps this is the reason why people get upset when he moves up and he moves draft capital around, because he's been so good later in drafts and with instances like this that you're like, hey, wait, don't throw all that stuff away. But ultimately, I think the whole prize of it is starting to come together. And that was one of the things too, like during the free agency period, is when these teams go out and they make these huge moves, and it's, hey, look at this team, they signed him, or they did this, or you traded for D Ford, or you did this or whatever. The Bears aren't at that stage anymore. It's like they made the big move last year. Late in August, you got Khalil Mack. Okay, they signed Allen Robinson in free agency. You don't need to make those huge moves anymore. This team is coming back. They're returning 20 of 22 starters. They now have they got their front line opening act. They've got that all taken care of. Now we need to go back and fill it in. And again, you look back at the great Bears teams of the past, 85, and of course in the 2000s, those teams were deep and were stacked with players that you can continue to bring up and bring in. And that is the thing, because at some point you're going to need some of these backups to step up. And that's really where I think that Ryan Pace excels, is in this instance. And that's why he's the GM of the year. And I think this is why this team, I don't have a fear of a regression or anything. Like, everybody wants to act like it was like this team is not a fluke. Like, it's not. If anything, the team underachieved last year because there were some winnable games that they left on the table. The game of Miami, the game against the Giants. They should have had the double doink should have never happened, because they should have had a 1st-round bye, and then they would have crushed the Rams. They would have destroyed the Saints. They would have gone to the Super Bowl, and you know what? I would have taken my chances. So I think that this team is set up, and I think Ryan Pace has put them together expertly, and I think everybody should be excited. But that's just me, the eternal optimist.
Before I turn it over to Bearlissimo and Danny to ask you some questions, I got to get your reaction to the tweet that was sent out by Alex Bars, the guy that you just mentioned a couple of minutes ago. Alex Bars yesterday tweeted out, "I'm a Chicago Bear, bear fucking down." Did you see that? And what was your reaction to it?
My reaction to it is right now. I'm seeing it in the moment. I'm hearing it. Like, that's amazing. I love it. You know what? And that's oh my God. I love it. It's so funny. And this is one of the things, obviously I dabble a lot in fantasy football, and we always try to make things fun. And it's one of our things. And it's so funny when you have people, and let's be honest, like I'm not a college age kid. I'm not a high school age kid. And so it's so jarring to people, on the other side of 30 to see somebody use the F word or whatever on social media, and everybody clutches their pearls. They're like, oh my gosh, I declare, I can't believe it. No, this is a young kid who's excited about playing. I don't think that there's anything wrong with it. And now that I know that's how he feels, I'm even more excited. And this guy, now listen, I don't know when his jersey is going to come out. Perhaps I will think about it. But this is the perfect meld. Any time that there's a Notre Dame, I'm personally not a Notre Dame fan, but I know many Bears fans are. So anytime there's a guy who's that excited, who's coming from Notre Dame, I think it's amazing, and I wish I had known about this sooner because I would have retweeted that dog and probably got in trouble. But I don't care because this is an exciting time.
Well, somebody from the Chicago Bears organization or his agent got to him because the tweet was down and rewritten without the F word, but we saw it before it was gone. Let me bring in my man George Bayliss, aka Bearlissimo, for all the way across the pond to ask you a couple questions.
Yeah, so obviously you're the man to ask for fantasy. So in terms of the Bears defense, because I don't see there being, like you've alluded to, I don't see there being a big fall off with the Bears defense. In fact, if anything, I see Pagano staying after it and staying aggressive and really getting on teams and trying to drive it down their throat. Whereas Vic, as we saw in the Giants game and a couple of other games, tended to let coverages get soft in the second half and allow a few more teams and late scores. So where do you rank the Bears defense next year for fantasy? Do you still have them high? Are they one?
Oh, yeah. They're definitely going to be, if not the first defense taken off the board, at least top three. Because as you said, Chuck Pagano is an established coach in this league. And I know a lot of people were like, well, the Colts, I'm like, okay, when he was the head coach of the Colts, he wasn't in charge of he's the head coach. He's not in charge of the defense. I think that his resume speaks for himself. And I was thrilled. I thought that it would have been, I know there was talk about other coaches coming in, but when Pagano was introduced, I'm like, this is perfect. Like, this is a Chicago Bears type of defensive coordinator. And I think he's going to come out and just keep that momentum going. And as you said, probably be a little bit more aggressive, because there were times last year where I felt that they could have dialed it up a little bit more. Hopefully we'll see the continued aggression. And, in this, I don't know how much this plays into it too. It's like Pagano probably wants to be a head coach again, which is like, that's fine. I understand. Like, we all have career goals. So if he's going to make his mark by making sure that his Bears defense is just as good, if not better. And I thought that a couple of the moves, it was disappointing to lose Amos and everything. Like, he had, grown up with us, and it would have been nice to continue to have him. But to me, there's not going to be a huge step off to Ha-Ha Clinton Dix. So that's going to be big. I don't think that, and again, the kid we got from Kansas State, I think that he's going to be able to step in and perhaps play that nickelback role a little bit and kind of help ease the loss of Bryce Callahan. And you got to look at how good the Bears are going to be in the return game. And I think Cordell Patterson, I don't know how much he's going to run the ball as a running back. I don't know how much he factors in as a wide receiver, but as somebody who excels in the turn game, I think that's an underrated part, an underrated signing. And when Tariq Cohen's not back there, to have Cordero Patterson back there, I think is going to be huge. So I'm definitely excited for that Bears defense.
And I don't know whether you noticed, Adam, but in the 7th round, we took Kerrith White, who I think is actually the better of the two backs at Florida Atlantic. And I don't know if you've seen, but in college last year, he had 28.7 yards per kick return average, as Danny mentioned earlier. But he's also a guy who catches a lot of balls out of the backfield and is a real home run threat. So as a late flyer, which of the Bears running backs might you sort of handcuff? And do you see Mitch Trubisky having a big year this year? Because in the second year of the offense, with everyone else in the second year, I see him having a big year.
Yeah, it's interesting because I know a lot of people love Devin Singletary. Like, that was the guy that everybody talked about. But I'm with you. I thought White was a pretty excitable playmaker. And again, there's another person who's probably going to figure into the mix as a special teams ace. I know people, they're like, why do we draft another running back? It's like, you need depth, you need special teams guys, and he's going to factor in both in coverage and in returning. So I think that was a pretty nice pickup. I'm not sure fantasy-wise how much value he's going to have, except in leagues where you get return yardage, which is rare. But, somebody to keep an eye on in dynasty leagues, perhaps take a little bit of a flyer. And you mentioned Mitch Trubisky, and I'm glad that you did. And I'm glad that you mentioned that it's his second year, because honestly, his rookie season, he wasn't afforded an opportunity to go out and show what he needed to show, which was unfortunate because obviously he was a one-year starter at North Carolina. He comes in, plays part of his rookie season with the Bears, doesn't get a lot of opportunity to throw the football. So that was really tough on his development as well. So now he comes in, gets a new offensive coordinator. He learns a new offense. And I thought that for a guy legitimately making his first year as a starter in a brand new offense, in a complicated offense, I thought he acquitted himself pretty nice. There were some missed throws. There were some, Obviously, everybody goes back to that week 1 opener against Green Bay, and I think it was Zach Miller he had or was it Shayne? He had the tight end open in the end zone.
Trey Burton.
Oh, no, Trey Burton. Geez, yeah. Zach Miller, that would have been obviously would not have been him. But Trey Burton was wide open. And people point to instances like that, but things like that come from playing football and playing a number of games, that learning from those mistakes. And 17 weeks later, he's never going to make that mistake. I'm not going to say never, but he's not going to make that mistake again. And so now you're coming in, you've got a full off season of working through this offense, of being able to evolve in this offense. And to me, Mitch is going to be one of those guys who steps forward this year and has a monster season. And you look at what Jared Goff has been able to do with the offense with Sean McVay. I think that Trubisky is going to have that same kind of trajectory. And anybody who doesn't draft, and I understand outside of like us, we'll probably take flyers on him. But if you're in a league without a lot of Chicago Bear fans, they're not going to draft him, but they're going to be scrambling to pick him up on the waiver wire because he's going to come out and he's going to start slinging the ball all over the field.
Hey, Adam. It's Danny. Thanks again for joining us this morning. So I want to go back to David Montgomery. And to me, he was the top-rated running back in this draft. And you mentioned perfect fit for this offense, and I totally agree with you. And I know they brought in Mike Davis as a free agent, but I have a feeling that Montgomery is going to be the starter eventually this year. So if you're having a fantasy draft today, are you drafting Montgomery or are you drafting Mike Davis?
Montgomery, 100%. Montgomery and Cohen could easily both be top 25 running backs in fantasy. We see it too much now, and it's just the way that the game has evolved that we don't see those 400 touch running backs who they used to be. That's the way it was. Obviously in the 90s when we were growing up, and Emmitt Smith and Barry Sanders and Thurman Thomas and all those guys. Like you could count on those guys touching the ball 20 to 25 times a game. It just doesn't work that way in the NFL. So now you get two guys who crack the top 25. I kind of liken it to what Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara were able to do with New Orleans the last couple of years. I really do believe that Montgomery and Cohen are going to work that way. And Mike Davis is a fine NFL player, and I think that he's great for depth. And I think that this is one of those situations where it's kind of wonky that free agency is before the draft, because I'm not sure that they would have brought in Mike Davis if they were able to address these needs in the draft. But when you go into a situation, you don't know what you're going to be able to get. That if Montgomery would have somehow gone off the board at the beginning of the second round or something had happened, at least you would have had a nice fallback. But now that they got their guy, and I think that this was the person that they had targeted all along. This was the player that they had identified sitting there without a pick in the first 2 rounds. The way that the running back position has been devalued in the draft, that you look at it, you look at your draft board, and you stand to reason that, okay, we should have a crack at this guy. And as long as he's available and it's not going to cost us too much, we can make this move. So now that he's in the fold, these two guys are definitely going to be the lead backs, and I'm excited for it. And again, it's going to be one of those things that anybody who follows me on social media or who watches the NFL Fantasy Live is going to be sick of me talking about it. This is going to be the guy. This is going to be the number one back. I mean, I believe Lance Zierlein is of the same mind, because I believe he also said that Montgomery could be the offensive rookie of the year, landing in the perfect spot. So it's not just us. I think there's a lot of people in concert with us thinking that Montgomery is going to be one of the top backs coming up for the upcoming season.
Adam, one of the things that we like to do here at the Barroom is make fun of Packers and Packer fans and people who write about the Packers and so forth. There's a guy who we fondly and respectfully, we refer to him as Peter Bukaki, and he has been trashing the Chicago Bears pick. He said, David Montgomery is a slower Jordan Howard and so forth. And there's no one better in the entire world at slashing the Packers than you. So I just want to give you an opportunity here, to uncensored, go at it. Talk to me about the Packers draft, or just talk to me about the Packers in general, and if it gets out of hand and you want me to erase it and it won't be on the podcast version, then fine. I'll do that. But just, you have a clean slate here for the next minute or so.
Well, I appreciate that, and it's one of those things too. I know the person that you're referring to. I only know it because Shayne and everybody and you guys will be responding to somebody who I have muted because he doesn't even warrant a block. He warrants a mute. Like I don't even have I can't go through the process of blocking you. I just mute you. I ignore your opinion because you know what? It ultimately doesn't matter. And I think it's so rich that what does a Packers fan and analyst know about quality running backs? You have not had a quality running back since the 1960s. Jordan Howard would be the best running back in Packers history. He barely cracks our top 10 if he does at all, but he would be the best of all time for you. So I don't need you to come in and talk about this. I don't need you to come in and try to explain to me. Don't Packers explain to me who's a good running back, because you wouldn't know one if you saw one. It's the same thing. Like I would not hire an Amish electrician because they don't know what they're talking about. It's not their thing. I would have them build a barn, but no, that's not what I want. So listen, Packers fan, I appreciate your interest in the Chicago Bears, and I understand, but let me tell you something. You've had 30 years? 30 years with Hall of Fame quarterbacks. Hall of Fame quarterback play, you have 2 Super Bowls. And you only got one of those Super Bowls because Jimmy Mack was there helping Brett Favre figure out what he's doing out there on the big stage. So I hope that you enjoyed your run, because it's over now. And now your jealousy and your anxiety is starting to rise to the surface because you're coming out and you're making comments of it. Like, why do you care about our draft? Why do you care? I'll be perfectly honest with you. I don't know who the Packers picked. You know why? Because I don't care. Because you guys don't matter. You're like the Lions and Vikings. You just don't matter anymore. You were fun. You were like Motley Crue. You were cool a number of years ago, but now you're not putting out any more hits. Nobody cares about you. You're Carly Rae Jepsen. Nobody. Oh yeah, I remember when this song was a thing. That's how I feel about the Packers. Oh, I remember when you mattered, because you don't now. And if it wasn't for your quarterback going out there and getting headlines for being kind of a diva, nobody would care about you anymore. So go out there, say what you will about the Bears draft picks. Let your jealousy rise to the surface, but ultimately, Bukaki, nobody cares about you, and nobody cares about your dumb takes. Thanks.
I love it. Hey, Jeffrey Ross is one of my favorite comedians. I got to tell you, you just gave him a run for his money as a roaster. That was brilliant stuff.
Oh, no. Jeff Ross, do not throw me on that one. No. Okay. Jeff Ross is the starter. I am the guy on the sideline holding the clipboard, signing in the plays. Do not put me in that category, please.
There you go.
What was even more impressive is he kept it clean.
Yes.
Which is even more impressive.
That is.
Because I would have F-bombed it all over the place.
And for Danny.
He doesn't deserve F-bombs.
Yeah.
It's one of those things. And by the way, I do like some of the Packers. I know Aaron Nagler is great.
Yes.
And I think that and it's fun. And it's like, I don't know. That person, though, is like, oh, my God. Like, you can give it a rest at some point. Like, it's fun to troll. Like, I know what it's like. I'll make some Packer comments here and there. But it's like, okay, you got to have a little bit of credibility at some point.
Exactly.
If you can't recognize, you're so over the top in not giving praise ever. Mm-hmm. Like, I can't take you seriously. Like,
right.
It's crazy to me. It's funny to me, but it's crazy.
Right, and we actually mentioned Aaron's name here the other night because he is a true, he's a fan of the Green Bay Packers, but he truly has journalistic standards to his evaluation.
100%.
He's gone after Aaron Rodgers a number of times, questioning his leadership and so forth. Aaron Nagler, for those who want to be informed about the Green Bay Packers and don't mind a little homerism, Aaron Nagler is a great follow on Twitter and to read his stuff. Hey, I gotta thank you first of all for jumping in with us for a half hour, and I gotta also praise you, Adam Rank, because one of the reasons we started Bears Barroom is because we were just tired of seeing the national media always having this East Coast bias and not talking as much as we'd like about the Chicago Bears and other Chicago sports teams. And now, with the Rams and Chargers out in LA, we're seeing a West Coast bias as well. You on the NFL Network are always a voice for the Chicago Bears, and the folks over at Good Morning Football on NFL Network are always talking about the Chicago Bears. But first and foremost, when you're on NFL Network and your work on your podcast and your work on Twitter and those great videos you post with your reaction to something, whether you agree with the Bears or disagree with the Bears, is just must follow material, just fabulous material. We want to thank you for representing Chicago and still doing your job as one of the top fantasy football analysts in the country. You're a magnificent guy, and we really, truly appreciate you popping in.
Oh, that's very nice of you. Thank you so much. And similarly, I do want to thank everybody who is listening to this podcast, who's part of the Bears Bar Room. It's really cool, and it's one of those things that you can kind of feel it, and I know that with Kay Adams and Kyle Brandt and everybody, perhaps we come off, them not so much, me definitely, as annoying in our effusive praise for the Bears, but it's a lot of fun, and it's cool to represent Chicago, and I do appreciate everybody getting my back. I remember, oh man, I wish I could remember this specific instance. There was something, and listen, I get stuff wrong. And as a matter of fact, I wasn't a huge fan of the Trubisky pick, and famously, it's still on my YouTube. I'll never erase it. And at some point, I hope I can show Mitch. Be like, here's how I reacted when you were drafted. I was pissed. I realized the error of my race about a day later, and I said, everybody, let's get back on board. But I want to keep this up and let everybody know that in the moment, I was really heated. But one of the things I wish I could remember this specific thing where I was wrong about something, and some fans of some team were coming after me, and they're like, "Oh, you're the worst! Like you're never right." And I'm not kidding. The overwhelming support of Bears Twitter just swept over like a wave off of Lake Michigan, just crushing all of these people. And I was like, it was really fun. I was like, oh, that's really nice of everybody. They're like, have you seen this video? Like, Rank picked them to go to the playoffs, so shut up. And it was like really cool. And I know on Instagram too, there's I have a huge Chicago following on that, so I really appreciate that. So I want to thank everybody who listens to this show and has been very supportive over the last year. Since I think that's how long our relationship's been going, or maybe it's been the last couple of years, but It's been really cool, and I really do appreciate it. And I do thank everybody, and it's one of those things living out here in Southern California, and to still know that there's a connection back home, it means a lot to me. So I want to thank everybody, and thank everybody for all of that. So it's my pleasure to come on and bear down. That's all I got left to say.
Adam, one last question.
Sure.
If Carl Brandt gets a colour commentary, what have you got to do to get a colour commentary on a preseason game this year? Because I want to hear that.
There you go.
You know what? I feel like I need to somehow stump for that. I don't know if we can get some. I don't know. I got to start.
We will retweet
the grassroots.
We will retweet.
Yeah, I got to start the grassroots effort. So let's see if I can. If I can make that happen. I don't want to step on Kyle's toes, though, but
I
love
the Bears game.
Absolutely. I was just going to say that. I love the idea of having you as a sideline reporter for a Chicago Bears game that the NFL Network covers. I am going to come up with a campaign for that, and we'll start it on social media soon, and we'll see what we can do. We were pretty successful with our Firefox campaign, so although I don't think they needed any help from us. I think the decision was baked in before we even started the campaign. Hey, Adam, before you leave, let our followers know where they can follow you on Twitter. Tell us a little bit about the podcast and anything else you want to promote.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, obviously, you can follow me on Twitter at Adam Rank. Simple enough. I'm on Facebook with the same handle as well, at facebook.com/Adam Rank. YouTube or Instagram, you can find me Adam Rank NFL, because somebody's been squatting on those names and I can't get them, and I've offered money, but whatever. it's still a lot of fun. At Adam Rank NFL on Instagram, at Adam Rank NFL on YouTube. I will have some videos coming out this week. There's a lot of fantasy stuff. If you're a Chicago fan, or if you're a fan of fantasy football, my YouTube page will probably speak to you a lot, because that's pretty much all that I talk about on that stuff. We're doing mock drafts, getting everybody ready for their fantasy drafts the coming season. Obviously, there'll be a lot of changes with some of the most recent, with the most recent draft coming out. And of course, I will probably start breaking down some of the Bears picks as well, and then going over who you should take first overall and things like that. So it'll be a lot of fun. So if you guys can hang out, and if you want my phone number, it's 213. No, I'm just kidding. But I can't do that. You can still, my mentions are open, or my DMs are open on Twitter. So don't be afraid. I'll be happy, especially this time of year. This is the time to get me.
Well, I got to tell you that
hang out.
There's a battle. There's a battle in our chat room. People are hoping to see you at Wrigley Field, and then other people are hoping to see you at Guaranteed Field. Cubs or White Sox? Which one, what's it going to be?
Oh my gosh! Well, this is the one thing that's always surprising to a lot of people. They're like, "Why are you an Angels fan?" And it's like, listen, I grew up out. Well, here's the thing. This is the thing. I'm glad I'm here to explain it. Baseball is one of those things, because football is easier to follow when you're not in the home city, because you watch most of the games, obviously, on television. Mm-hmm. Although I'm jealous of anybody who has season tickets. Baseball is such a part of your daily life that the team that you are closest to ends up being the team that you root for the most. Now, I was a youngster when we moved out here to Southern California, and my dad and my parents are Cubs fans. So I ended up growing up 21 minutes from Angel Stadium, but my dad was very much because the Dodgers had just won the World Series there in the 80s. My dad was very much like, you're never rooting for the Dodgers. So if you want to be Cubs, welcome aboard, but you're here. The Angels are there. That's fine. And so, of course, I became an Angels fan. But I was a Cubs supporter, but now that they've won the World Series, I don't feel like – I'm like, it seems too bandwagon-y, and I really didn't suffer – through all the trials and tribulations. So I'm like, I'll sneak in a Cubs hat here and there, but normally it's all Angels. So I apologize to the entire fan base now that I've alienated by choosing the Angels.
Maybe that's the part I should cut out.
Yeah, it's solid reasoning though, right?
No, it truly is.
Listen, if I almost went out to the Angels Cubs game, Cubs games a couple of weeks ago, but my friend who was going to go with me got injured, and so I'm like, we're not going to sit in a plane for 5 hours, and it's going to be cold. I'm like, forget it, we won't go. So when I do go out, so that would have been jarring for people, because they would have seen me in Angels gear. So now when I come out, if I come out this summer and go to a Cubs game, then I will be wearing Cubs gear, or at least Chicago gear. So then it'll seem very natural, and it won't be as off-putting as it would have been a couple of weeks ago in April.
All right. Well, fortunately, the Angels have a nice logo, and I always look at teams by uniforms and the attire they have, the apparel. That's the word. The apparel they have, and so wearing an Angels T-shirt or hat isn't a bad thing. So, Adam, thanks.
We got Trout.
Yeah. And who?
Oh, and by the way, because of 2005. Angel fans hate White Sox, hate the White Sox, I should say. So I know not that any Cubs fans need to live vicariously through an American League team, but you can adopt the Angels. It's not a big, there's no rivalry there. There's nothing but love. We've got a Portillo's near our stadium, so nice. It's all good.
Nice. Hey, Greg Braggs says that there's still one game that the Cubs have with the White Sox, so he's hoping to see you at Wrigley Field. And if he spots you, don't worry, Greg will come up to you with his camera in hand, and he'll get a quick interview with him.
100%. Yeah, it's July 3rd. It's the makeup game from the one that was snowed out.
So if you're
July, don't think that that's not on my radar.
Ooh, nice. All right, we're gonna let you go. You, as always, very, very, very generous with your time. Thanks for popping in the bar room, and we'll be in touch soon. Okay?
Thank you so much. And again, thank you to everybody out there in the bar room. I appreciate you all.
Thanks, Adam.
Thanks, Adam.
Thank you.
Man, what a guy. What a guy. What a guy. That's totally the type of guy you want to go to Portillo's and have a sandwich with and beer. Portillo's, of course, a Chicago icon for fast food, and they serve beer, so it's one of my favorite places. He'd be a great guy to, do the Portillo's thing when he's in town. All right, guys, we have tons of more stuff to talk about. So, we were supposed to be off in 20 minutes. I'm not sure how much longer you guys can go. You let me know. But we've got a few more topics to talk about. We definitely have to talk a little bit more about the UDFAs. And we didn't, in my mind, talk enough about this seventh round pick, Steven Denmark. So let me start there. We talked a little bit about him, but again, the physical freak nature of this player, the measurables make him such an intriguing target. And we've had intriguing, seventh round picks before. Like for instance, what was his name? Cornelius Washington, was it? The defensive end. Yeah.
Went to Detroit.
Yep. Went to Detroit, correct. And unfortunately, he just couldn't get it together. And so, this guy could be another Cornelius Washington, or he could be a Shannon Sharp, Hall of Famer who was drafted in the seventh round. So why don't you guys take over and have a discussion between the two of yourselves regarding this player?
Like I said earlier, when I heard his name, and I'm like, who is this guy? And I take pride in knowing every single prospect in the draft, but I had no idea who he was. I looked him up, and then right away, all right, this guy was a former receiver. He's converted over to defensive back. He plays at Valdosta State, and I'm like, all right, trying to get tape on him is very hard. But, I pulled up something off the YouTube, and it's probably a highlight tape or highlight reel. But, man, it's like when I look at these small school prospects, I want them to stand out. I want them to make themselves, pop on tape for me without even me knowing who they were. So I went in there. I didn't know what his number was. I didn't know anything. I just knew he was a physical specimen. And sure enough, you see him playing cornerback. You see this big 6'3", 220-pound guy playing cornerback. And the first tape I put on, he jams the receiver. And I don't know if there was something going on with them, in the game in terms of personal talking back and forth. And he literally runs him into his own team's bench. And I'm like, whoa, what's going on here? And then as the tape goes on, you see him, being able to flip his hips, mirror his feet, utilize his quick feet to mirror receivers off the line of scrimmage. I'm like, all right, this guy's got some potential here. And then next thing you know, he shows some awareness in coverage, being able to peel off his man and come in and do tackle the runner for a minimum gain. It's stuff like that. It's like you watch. The more you watch of him, the more excited you get. And then you see him then coming off the edge as a blitzer. And now you're thinking all types of things like, all right, this guy can be, possibly a nickel safety. Because I really do see him as a safety. I don't know how Bearlissimo thinks about him, but I think he could probably be a safety because, he's 6'3", like I said, 220. He's got the physical traits. I mean, he's got the 4.46 speed. He's got the 43-inch vertical. But the last real big corner, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the last real big corner to play in the NFL was Brandon Browner. And that was a couple of years ago with the Seahawks at 6'4" and 20. Well, I mean, in terms of this size, Shimon's a little bit more thinner. I mean, this guy's like 6'3", 220. Browner was 6'4", 221. So that I'm talking about body types, pretty similar there. So I see Denmark potentially in the future possibly being like a nickel/safety, a guy who can come up in the box and help support the run, possibly even swing out and cover tight ends in the slot, maybe even receivers. Some of those bigger receivers we were talking about earlier, how you can put these. The new thing now is put these bigger, tall receivers in the slot, take advantage of their size versus smaller defensive backs. I see him in that kind of route. So I really am intrigued by him. Like I said, the tape is more of a highlight tape. That's why come training camp, come seeing live against competition, he's a guy that I'm going to have my eyes squarely on. I want to see how he competes.
Before we get Bearlissimo's comments, let me play a little audio from yesterday's press conference. Ryan Pace talking about Denmark.
Yeah, it's funny. Matt always jokes with these guys when they switch from receiver to corner is questions their hands, right? So, but I think all we see is a guy with these kind of measurables and this kind of talent, and you turn on the tape and whoa, it catches your eye, and then we send Deshay and Champ Kelly down there to work him out. At Valdosta, and they come back and they also have the video, and so we can test him in things that we want to see. How does he flip his hips? How does he transition? And then on tape, for a guy that just switched to that position, his ability to track the ball, like he has ball production, interception production, his ability to stay calm on a deep ball and get his head around with poise and track the ball is very intriguing. And so this late in the draft, it's just a very interesting and intriguing prospect for us to take. And I can tell you this, like when we go to the rookie minicamp, he's going to be one of the guys I'm most interested in watching just because of the traits that he possesses.
Bearlissimo.
Like Danny's mentioned, I mean, Deone Buchanan, the safety sort of linebacker hybrid, that's a potential for him. But when I look at his tape, Danny, and you've mentioned it, his ability to jam off the line on the wide receivers is extremely good. And his ability to understand route concepts and depths, obviously from being a former wide receiver, obviously is very good as well. One of the things that he doesn't have, sorry about the noise in the background there, one of the things he doesn't have is the skills sort of in terms of flipping, etc., that you would see from a cornerback who's been doing it for years. So he knows the routes and he knows how to break down and chop his feet. One of the things I was impressed with, considering it's his first year at corner, was not just his ability to run with routes with receivers in man, but his ability to switch between players in zone. And that was one of the things that I also saw from him that was very encouraging. Plus, as you mentioned, his blitzing ability, Danny, his timing on his blitz was absolutely fantastic. And he really delivers a blow when he actually comes down into the box and hits. And as we heard Josh Woods mention, when you're a safety coming down into the box, you're the uncounted man. And for someone 6'3", 220, 4.4 speed, that's going to be a load that's unaccounted for in the blocking scheme. So he could cause havoc from the sort of the nickel potentially position or covering tight ends. So yeah, there's a lot of versatility for him there. But I haven't written him off at corner yet either, because like I say, one of the things he's going to learn is he plays cornerback, is the ability to sort of place the inside hand, to use the inside leverage, keep the receiver to the outside of the sideline, keep your hand in front of them as you're running with them, and to be able to turn and play the ball. And he shows the skills to be able to play the ball. He shows the ability to catch it and then to turn into a returner. So I'm not going to discount him as a cornerback, but yeah, certainly that sort of inside, closer to the quarterback, closer to the running back, that's where his size, his speed, and his mass and his ability to hit really helps the team the most, rather than on the perimeter.
Okay, we're going to finish up the show talking about some of the undrafted free agents. But before I do that, I do have a soundbite that I want to share with you guys and get your input on. This was Matt Nagy being asked about all the weapons now that he has at the running back position and how he is going to work with this diverse group of running backs, and in particular how he might use Tariq Cohen within this new look backfield. This was Matt Nagy.
So what it does is, number one, that they're all a little bit different, and I like that. I think that it enables us as coaches to kind of figure out what guys do well. We have a good idea right now, but with Mike being new, and then with David coming in being new, and Kirith coming in, they all have a little bit of a different mix with exactly what it is. And so we're going to test it out and see and feel it out, but it gives you options, and they're weapons. In my opinion, they're all weapons. They can play on every down. You feel good about where they're at, and we as coaches got to figure out exactly what it is. And then there's only there's so many touches, so you got to balance that, and that is the difficult part. But it's a lot easier to do when you have that, with these type of guys that have these different strengths.
One of the other things that he talked about was what they're going to diagnose with these new players is what routes they're already comfortable with. They're going to, test them on the entire route tree, what the Bears want them to run. But they're also going to kind of focus in on where their strengths are with these particular routes. Some some players are adept at, running a particular route and others are not. So that's going to be a really interesting process that the team is going to undergo in the next months or so with the different OTAs. Danny, any thoughts you have about what Nagy just shared there regarding routes for running backs?
And it just goes to show you how important a running back who can catch the ball out of the backfield, who can line up as a slot receiver or can line up even out wide by the numbers, how important it is for him and his play calling, because that's what he wants to do. He wants to create mismatches. I'm sure we'll see a number of formations where we see multiple running backs in there at the same time. We could see, Montgomery in the backfield. We can see Tariq Cohen flanked out as a slot receiver. And, Cohen for a running back is a pretty good route runner as well. So, he wants to see where and which routes these guys are best suited at. So, for example, Cohen can line up in the slot, like I said, just run those routes, probably the vertical routes, more so utilizing his speed. Same thing with this kid White, the kid from Florida Atlantic. Same thing. He can probably come out of the backfield with real routes, utilize his speed off on the edge, get a mismatch on a linebacker, and take advantage of him that way. So, yeah, that's backs out of the backfield that can catch and that can create create mismatches on the defense are very important to Matt Nagy, and that's why we kept saying that he wants these guys that have good hands, and not only just be able to catch a screen pass or catch a ball on the flat, but be able to run routes and be able to be an extra receiver out there for him.
Yeah, so passing routes out of the backfield that you typically tend to get is like the swing pass. You get the check release, you get the speed out, you get the dagger route, which is the sort of the go to the end of the line and sit in front of the linebackers, and you have the out and up. And we've seen all of those run very well from Tariq Cohen last year, but we didn't really have anyone else to run those routes. And like you say, Danny, with Kerrith White and David Montgomery and Mike Davis, all three of those guys can actually run those routes and run them efficiently. But like you've mentioned, the other thing that I see is the ability to actually motion, to do switches and to do exchanges, actually sort of line them up as wide receivers, bring them into the backfield, line them up as running backs, put them out wide, with a motion or an exchange. And there is the ability there with sudden change of direction, which all these guys have. That is an absolute nightmare for anybody but an experienced defensive back to try and cover man for man. And if you've got guys who also have an understanding of what the zone that they're facing, if it's zone coverage, then you really do have a real mix match issue. And you got to factor into that, I think, Cordarrelle Patterson as well as a potential running back from the backfield and wide receiver into the backfield. Which that's the thing with all of these pieces, they're all interchangeable. And for Nagy as a play caller and for a defensive coordinator to try and scheme against, that's the thing that paralyzes teams the most is not knowing what's coming, as I've mentioned before. But I think all these guys, with a sudden change of direction they all have, they all get up to speed very, very quickly, and they all have good change of direction skills. And that only bodes well for running actual proper receiver routes.
All right, let's
potentially next season, we're going to have an offense that we have never seen before here in Chicago, guys. I mean, we're going to have an offense where there's no one guy you can hone in on it if you're a defensive coordinator. You're going to have options from the backfield, from the receiver, from the slot, from tight end, from everywhere. It's kind of similar to what the Chiefs have right now, right? It's like, you know what's coming. You see the formation, but you just can't stop it. And I think that's going to be an option here with the Bears, where they're going to have so many weapons across the field. You don't know who to hone in on. You know what the formation is. You know what they could do, but you can't stop it.
You've got tight ends who can run and pass. You've got running backs who can run, pass, and catch. You've got wide receivers who can run, pass, and catch. When you're a defensive coordinator and you're trying to figure the 11 to send out against what you see in the huddle, and then they break out and they're in something completely different, you've then got to have like 6'3", 6'4", 250 guys potentially covering a Tariq Cohen, potentially covering a David Montgomery, potentially covering a Cordarrelle Patterson, depending upon what you've seen from, outside of the huddle to inside of the huddle. And then if you do send on like your DBs, well, then we're just going to run it down your throat because all of those guys can run. So absolute nightmare for defenses next year. And whilst it might harm fantasy scores, I really couldn't care less because it's going to make defenses absolutely pap their pants. Sorry to use a British phrase there. Shit their pants.
There you go.
So there you go. So that's what I see from it. I mean, I couldn't be more enthused.
Hey, before we talk about undrafted free agents, some terrible news has just been made aware to me. Thank you, Bobby Bombs, for sharing this. Corey Ballantyne, a cornerback who I was really high on and was hoping that he would land with the Bears. Instead, he was picked in the 6th round by the New York Giants. He was injured in a shooting off campus in Topeka, Kansas, early Sunday morning. This, according to NFL.com. And a former teammate of his was killed, Dwayne Simmons, 23 years old. Ballantyne is expected to make a full recovery, and we're happy to hear that, but saddened to hear that Dwayne Simmons was shot and killed in this incident. The Giants have said that they're looking into this matter, and we wish Corey Ballantyne the very best. A totally unfortunate situation there for Corey. Danny, you and I saw him up close at the Senior Bowl. I think I was a little higher on him than you were, but you were, I know, impressed with him as a player. It's just sad news.
Yeah, just horrible news. I mean, luckily he's okay, but yeah, sad for his teammate there. But yeah, I mean, in terms of him as a prospect, he's a Division II player. Early on down the week at the Senior Bowl, he looked a little bit out of place, maybe a little intimidated, but he is the one of the guys that continually got better as the week went on. And you saw his confidence grow. You saw him being able to, in the one-on-one drills, be able to do a better job of, getting his technique down. And eventually in the game, he made a couple plays as well. So, yeah, he's a guy that impressed a lot of people, a lot of scouts, as the week went on.
Okay, let's talk undrafted free agents. I said at the beginning of the show that this was going to be our next to last podcast, the Draft on Tap podcast, I should say, and we got a lot more podcasts coming. Don't you worry. But the next podcast is going to be very much devoted to these undrafted free agents. So I just want to get some quick opinions from Bearlissimo and from Danny on these free agents. And I know that we've overstayed our welcome over at the Bearlissimo household. So George, if you could give us a couple of quick thoughts on any of the undrafted free agents you want to share information with, and then we'll say goodbye to you.
Sorry, I'm mute again there, Dolo. Sorry about that.
That's fine.
So there's a few guys that I've identified. I mean, obviously, we've already spoken about Dax Raymond, Emmanuel Hall. I don't think anything more needs to be said about those guys. Alex Bars is a legitimate potential replacement, I think, for Carl Long term. The guy is an absolute mauler. Very much in your favourite guard, the Guardfather. Very much in his mould. Very similar player, very athletic, very strong. Hopefully, if he's over his injury, he's going to be a real legitimate piece on the offensive line going forward. Guys who I like the look of from tape, and I'll explain further why a little bit later. Matthew Betts, the guy from Laval Rouge, the Canadian kid. What I saw from him is he's quick. He's got a very good change of direction. He's got a really nice hump move, which he's using both hands to get rid of the blocker that's on you. He really wants to punish QBs when he gets there, and he's spent some time playing middle linebacker as well. So he's a guy that potentially adds versatility at the bottom end of the roster in being able to potentially cover two spots. Might make someone like Nick Kwiatkowski a little bit more expendable. Chuck Harris, Khalil Mack has already reached out to, University of Buffalo, defensive end, 6'3", 265. Again, very good pass rush in terms of being able to get to the outside, a nice spin move counter, very strong. Needs to get a little bit lighter and a little bit quicker, I think, because I don't think he's going to be a defensive end for the Bears. He's going to have to stand up and be an outside linebacker. But he's a guy I like the look of. So on the defense, those are two guys. Clifton Duck from Appalachian State was a legitimate potential draftee. But the guy I really sort of zeroed in on is a guy that I really like the look of is Adarius Pickett. I mean, he looks like a really angry dude as a centre fielder, but also the ability to match up with receivers one-on-one. So those are some of the guys that I really like the look of. And one last name, just might be interesting to keep an eye on, Georgia Southern. I don't know if you've seen him, Danny. Ellis Richardson, 6'3", 240 tight end, former quarterback, former halfback. I see him as a move tight end. He's very quick. He can run legitimate routes. He's got really nice hands. He's more than usable as a blocker, although he's not an inline blocker by any means. But the guy absolutely hits like a train on special teams as well. So again, at the bottom end of the roster, I see him as a potential threat to Braunecker. in terms of that sort of area. But those are the guys that I'm certainly most interested in, and I'll be sharing sort of what I've seen on video a little bit later on those.
Bearlissimo, I know you've got to put the kids to bed, and I really appreciate the amount of time you've given us today. We value you so much, your opinion and so forth. We're going to say goodbye to you. Have a great night, and we'll talk to you again soon, okay?
Thanks, guys. Cheers, Danny.
Take
Bye,
care.
Aldo.
Take care, buddy. Talk to you
Bye,
later.
guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Danny Shimon, the bar room is, it's sort of like a late at night. The piano player's got the closing theme music and so forth. But we're going to, keep the bar room open just a little longer than our anticipated 1 p.m. stop time, because I want to get your thoughts on these undrafted free agents that you've had a chance to study. And then for our final draft on tap, you and Shayne will give us a more comprehensive breakdown on these players, particularly since we need to, do some homework on these guys. Some of these guys I've never heard of. I didn't know they were alive, most of these guys. So pick a few names for us that you can comment on, and then we'll close the shop.
Yeah, I mean, Bearlissimo did a great job of just kind of going through, a thumbnail sketch of all these guys. But, I said earlier, this is one of the more talented undrafted free agent class I think the Bears have ever brought in. And not just because Dax Raymond is a guy that, we've talked about here on this show before. He's a guy that you and I both like. He's a guy that if they had picked him with a 6th-round pick or even one of those 7th-round picks, I'd be ecstatic, to have him and to get him in here as an undrafted free agent. I think is a real coup for Ryan Pace and the staff. The other thing that sticks out to me is the 2 guys from Notre Dame, Alex Bars and the center, Sam Mustapher. So, I mean, obviously, our Harry Heastan, our offensive line coach, was doing some recruiting here, and he's able to get these 2 guys. Both guys had draftable grades for me. Bars was more of like a 5th-round guy, and Mustapher was more of like a 6th, 7th-round guy. But, I mean, just start off first with Bars. I mean, the guy's got size, 6'6", 312. His arms aren't the greatest. I mean, they're about average in terms of length, almost about 33 inches. So he's going to be more of an internal guy, probably at guard position. But he is versatile. He started games at left guard. He started games at right tackle. He started games at right guard. So the team captain, unfortunately, he injured his knee 5th game of this past season, so he missed most of the season. But he's a guy, like I guess, good size, thick frame. We'll get into his tape and some of his scouting points, positives and negatives, on our next show. But his teammate, Mustapher, is another guy who's a tough SOB, man. He's a center, another team captain, a guy who's got 32-inch arms, not real athletic, if you will, but a guy who, like I said, is tough, a 2-year starter, durable, team captain. He's made 38 straight starts. He's a guy that didn't surrender a sack or a quarterback hit, and only yielded 6 quarterback hurries and 889 snaps this past season. So definitely one of those guys. He's a finalist for the Remington Trophy, which goes to the nation's top center. The person who actually won it was Bradbury, the guy that the Vikings took in the 1st round. So this is a highly decorated college center that I think has a chance. He might not stick on the original roster, but he definitely has a chance for the practice squad. And again, he's probably going to be a primarily a center. So if you're, again, we're talking about free agency, right? We're talking about the Cody Whitehair potential contract there. So if you ever lose that, if you ever lose him, you can always swing James Daniels back up to guard, or probably fill in with a guy like Alex Bars, for example, at guard. And then put this kid in as a backup or as a center. So just the quality of undrafted free agents that they were able to bring in and corral is really, really impressive. And this is what you got to take a look at when you think of the Bears draft. Not only was Khalil Mack their 1st-round pick, Anthony Miller was your 2nd-round pick, but you also got to take effect these guys that he brings, these undrafted free agents. And I think these are going to help solidify the back end of the roster and give the Bears some more depth.
Great stuff, Danny. And is there we've talked about Dax Raymond a bit, but I want you to finish the show talking about Dax again for our audience, because I really do believe, I was actually looking for the soundbite that I got from him down at the Senior Bowl, but instead I'll share that on the next Draft on Tap. This kid, as you've pointed out a few times on your tweets and so forth, this kid was on a mission for a couple of years. He was in Russia as part of a Mormon program, and so he missed some time playing college football, but that may have worked out to his benefit. He's 24 years old. the tape on him is pretty amazing in my viewpoint in terms of how he kind of fits in with a Nagy offense. This guy could be the top undrafted free agent and a guy who just a complete steal. So finish up with your thoughts on Dax Raymond, and then we'll close the bar room.
Yeah, another guy we saw down at the Senior Bowl, and to be honest with you, I had no idea. I had never heard of him prior to the Senior Bowl. That I saw him as part of that in tight end group. So I just did some tape study before we came down to Mobile, and then during the Mobile session, you and I both saw him in practice, and we saw him get better. We saw him make plays, and Utah State runs a very complex, high-paced, high-volume offensive system. So I think he would fit in nicely with the Bears scheme here. His age, I think, had a role as to why he went undrafted, as well as I think he's been characterized as a move tight end, as a guy who cannot block. Now, he's not proficient as a blocker. I'm not saying he's going to line up day one in line and be a guy who dominates defensive ends at the point of attack. He's not going to do that. But what he will do, he'll give you an effort. He's not some of these guys who just says, all right, I'm just a pass catcher. I'm not going to try and block. No, he'll try and block. So what that tells me is he's willing to learn. He's willing to get better, and I think he will get better. I think he will make this roster. I have no doubt in my mind. The Bears only have 3 tight ends going into the draft. I think he'll be one of the tight ends there. What I like about him is he's got the tall frame. He's an easy mover with good foot quickness. What that means is he gets off the line of scrimmage in a hurry, and he's quickly into his route pattern, and he can separate from linebackers. So if he has an issue is possibly maybe with the quick twitch guys, he might be able to have some difficulty separating, but he's got the ability with 10.25-inch hands and 33-inch arms to extend away from his body and reel in the catch, which is very important for these guys who don't always have the great separation. You can always extend away and box out a defender behind you and go ahead and get the ball. So he's a guy who's a high-volume producer in terms of pass receptions. He's very, like I said, easy mover, can get into his routes real quick. He can run clean routes. He's going to have to clean up some of his route running, obviously. But, in terms of playing at the level of competition he was playing at, I think he's a pretty solid route runner. So it gives you all these move options in terms of the passing game. He's a guy you can throw screen passes to. He's not as big as Travis Kelce. He's not as good of a blocker as Travis Kelce is.
Right.
But he's a guy who's got that potential to become a Travis Kelce. I don't want to give him that name. I don't give him that title. But sure. He's got that. He gives me that type of feel where this guy could be another weapon. Again, we're talking about adding more and more weapons. You add a weapon like this at the tight end position to go with Trey Burton, and then eventually a fully developed Adam Shaheen. Again, we have so many weapons here on offense. Who, as a defensive coordinator from the opposite team, who do you concentrate on? Who do you stop? And that's what I love about this. It's just more speed, more options, and more flexibility on offense.
Yeah, Matt Nagy talked yesterday about the vibe at Hallis Hall, and I'll play that soundbite for you in our next Draft on Tap. But he talked about, that the vibe now is better than it was a year ago at this point, even though he sensed that vibe was pretty high for a young team that was getting together and moving out, the first season as a team. Now he says that the vibe is about players being confident. It's about players, working hard in the weight room. It's about players doing their homework with their studies. It's about players the veteran players who are leading in team meetings so that the coaches don't have to do all the talking. The veterans are stepping up and telling the new players, this is how you do this and this is how you do that. That is so huge. I have to tell you that we've talked about, our optimism and our carefulness about the 2019 season, but those are those little intangibles that you see in a football team that that you learn about as a football team, and you really can't put a value on that, until you see it on the football field. But it's definitely a really, really good sign for the chemistry of this team.
It's a winning mindset.
Yes.
They don't go out there and maybe we'll win. No, they go out there and they expect to win now. Mm-hmm. They know that they're the hunted now, that everyone's coming for them, and they relish that role, it seems like. and they want to prove to everybody, hey, last year was not a fluke. Last year was the real deal, and we're coming back, and we are determined that that double doink is not going to be our story. It's not going to be how this Bears team is going to be defined. We're going to come out here. We're going to get past that. And Nagy made a point to say that yesterday in this conference. Like, hey, you guys keep talking about this elephant in the room. He goes, there's no elephant in the room. I've talked to my team about this. We've moved on past this. All right. You can say the missed kick. It's no big deal.
Mm-hmm.
We're moving on. We're looking forward. And they're looking forward with a mindset that, hey, you know what? We're going to come out, we're going to win, and we're going to prove that we are legit.
He even went further than that. He brought up Cody Parkey's name up 2 or 3 times. He said, you can say it, which is, again, a testament to this guy's leadership. He's not
so
afraid.
refreshing. He's not hiding. He's not mincing words. He's not up there like John Fox mumbling and trying to get past things. No, he hits it on straight ahead. All right, you guys want to talk about Cody Parkey? All right, Cody Parkey missed a kick. All right, we moved on. We're done. That was last year. We're here. We got new players. We got a whole new mindset that we are the team to beat. You want this NFC division crown? You come get it.
And I got to tell you this, John Fox is still doing it. He's still mumbling, and he's still withholding information in his TV gig. Sorry, John, that's just the way I see it. And perhaps I'm wrong. I don't know. I don't listen to you all that much. I kind of mute it every time he comes in because it's just a bad memory. But nonetheless, John Fox, no hard feelings. All right, I want to finish off by letting people know that the Mike North Advantage returns tomorrow night, Monday night, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. Mike and I are going to have a good time talking sports. We're going to, Mike is not a big fan of the NFL draft, but I'm sure he's been doing his homework on some of these players and is going to share some opinions. And we'll also be talking about the White Sox, the Cubs, and anything else he wants to talk about. And we'll also, I know this, he's going to announce a very special announcement tomorrow night, so stay tuned for that. And then our next Draft on Tap on our final show, which probably will be another long one, 2 hours or so. We are probably going to do that later in the week. We haven't finalized things, but I'd like to try to do it on Thursday and have that for you live on Thursday night with the podcast available Friday morning so that you can listen to it over the weekend. And we've got other podcasts coming up. We've got I Have a Stream by Johnny Santucci. We've got the Box Office Barflies by Tucci and Joey Mandel. So we're going to cover some entertainment things. It's just fun times at the Bears Barroom. I hope that you enjoyed this show, and I hope that you tell your friends about it, that you retweet it, brag a little bit about us. And if you don't like us, then keep your mouth shut, okay? Remember, if you drink, please do not drive. And always, say it with me, Danny, bear down!